What's up, guys? Today on this episode, we will be going over the long and illustrious career of Kyle Brennan from Little League all the way to his current job working as a professional baseball coach for the Houston Astros. Kyle Brennan, a Long Island, New York native, brings a wealth of experience and a unique journey to the world of professional baseball. A 5-year Division I catcher at the University of Buffalo, Kyle's playing career laid the foundation for his future as a coach and mentor. In 2018, Kyle launched Brennan Performance, a business focused on developing athletes to reach their full potential. His expertise and dedication caught the attention of professional baseball, and in 2020 he joined the pro ranks, initially working with catchers and outfielders. By 2022, Kyle transitioned to the role of hitting coach, spending a transformative year in the Dominican Republic where he immersed himself in learning Spanish and refining his coaching skills. What a beast. Kyle has also served as an unofficial position player rehab coach, collaborating across departments to help athletes return to peak performance. Currently, he is a hitting coach at the low A professional level, continuing to make an impact on the next generation of professional players. Beyond baseball, Kyle's background is just as impressive. He holds a degree in exercise science, is a certified strength and conditioning specialist, and also worked as an emergency medical technician. He's a hero. He was once on track to become an orthopedic physician assistant before following his passion for coaching, which was the right choice, just saying. Kyle's journey is a testament to his commitment to leadership, development, and lifelong learning. A perfect introduction to the deeper dive we'll take into this story today. And I'm glad to be here to facilitate this discussion, Kyle. I appreciate you, dude. I've been super excited to do this one in particular with your whole backstory, your journey through the ranks from youth baseball to your current status as a coach. I know that you and I have talked a lot about your experiences in the baseball world, but to hear it wall to wall, so to speak, is definitely exciting for me. Because I know, just in typical conversation, some things don't come up, some things do, just based on relevance and whatnot. So, I'm interested to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, hopefully I can remember all of it.
Yeah,
No plan.
I think that's definitely a concern of mine too, for me personally. But I think it's one of those things where once you start talking, you start remembering. Your recall gets a little bit better.
Absolutely. So if you want, I have a story to tell.
Yeah, let's hear it.
It's not from the backstory, it's from yesterday.
Okay, hit me with that.
But I think it's something we would talk about otherwise, so I'm excited to do it here. So my parents built a brand new, beautiful house down here in Sarasota. They moved down in the fall. I stayed up in New York and then decided to come down here for the holidays and then spend some time before spring training. In this new house, we have a pool, which is awesome. We also have a 7-year-old Havanese, which is a little dog. His name is Teddy, and he's like a Shih Tzu. You've met him, but he's like a Shih Tzu type size, right? In the house in New York, there was no pool. So now he's here with the pool. He knows how to swim. He's swam before. I think that's instinctual for dogs, but he has not. Um, the concern is that if he gets into the water in this pool, he's not going to know how to get out. It's not like there's a clear like exit sign or something like that for him. When he's in
We
there
don't know
from
if he
his
can read either.
so from his perspective, he's in the water and all the railing or like the pavers on the outside all look the same. There's one corner of the pool which has a series of steps, but the top one is shallow enough where it's like shallow enough for him where he can get out. The rest of it's either a wall or there's a bigger step. It's deep enough or shallow enough, whatever, where he can stand and keep his head up above the water, standing on the step, but it's too deep for him to jump out of. So I when realizing like if he doesn't learn where to go, if he falls in for whatever reason and we're not there, like he's not gonna be able to figure it out. So okay, we got to teach him. So yesterday we finally got around to it, and first thing, put him in the water near the step, and he swims to the edge, gets out. Okay, good job. We do that a few times. We bring him further away from the step. He swims, gets out. Okay, good job. Then we put him a little bit further away from this corner where the step is, and put him in, and immediately he starts swimming towards the house because he looks up and he can see the house. He runs into the wall, and he can't, there's no step there, so he can't jump out. He tries to jump up anyways and gets up a little bit, like 2, 3 inches, sees over the ledge, and then you know can't propel himself out, so he falls, and he dunks his head under, and I'm behind him. So I'm like, oh my God. And I go to pick him up like instinctually, and I help him to the side of it. Try it again. So I'm like, hopefully he learns that that's not a good strategy. We do it a few more times. I have my brother with like some treats, and he's calling his name. We're encouraging him to go to that one side. He figures it out a little bit. He keeps going to the wall, but then once he realizes there's no step, he goes to his right and figures it out. The tricky part is the other opposite corner has that step, which again he can stand in, but it's like a short-term false sense of security because if he does get stuck, he won't be able to get out. And he's going to have to make the decision of, do I leave this relative safety that I can't sustain for however long he could stand like that, or do I go and explore another way? He, we've encouraged him a few times. Then this one time, okay, I'm going to put him in the water over there where that like kind of trap is, and I'm not going to be in there with him. I'm going to see if he can do it without, like, no one's going to call his name, no one's going to encourage him or point him in the right direction. So he goes in, he swims to the decoy, we'll call it. He gets in, he's standing up, and you can see him kind of looking around like, how do I get out of here? He's got his, it's on a corner, so he's got his paws up, and he's trying to jump and like do kind of like a muscle up, which he obviously has no chance of doing. See, I'm watching him fail at it, and in the back of my mind, I'm now getting really anxious and worrying because I'm right now he's safe because I could just go get him and we're all right here. Like there's no real acute danger, but I'm picturing him on his own, somehow fell in, no one's around, and now he's basically on his way to drowning. And so it was just the whole experience was just such a metaphor for what parenting and seeing, child that you love struggle. And then there was also the coaching realm of it where you have to, how do I teach him to do this? I'm thinking about like putting constraints up or giving him rewards or incentives or letting him fail on his own. Like it was just this whole uh, I empathized for parents watching their kids fail at something, and I wanted to help him, but I also know that if I help him from this, he's never going to learn, and then if he does actually fall in, he's not going to have the skill set to handle it.
He's
So
cooked.
he could be cooked.
Yeah. Poor Ted going through some serious stress tests right there.
Hmm. But yeah, it was just a cool, uh, I get like metaphor for the whole thing of like you don't want them to fail, you want to protect them, but they also have to be ready to handle it on their own, and you have to be willing to sit there and watch them suffer, knowing that they're not really suffering. It's just it was cool.
Yeah, no, dude, I've never put my one of my dogs through a swimming stress test as you're describing, but what that kind of makes me think of is when I was growing up watching my younger brothers play baseball or play sports in general. Like I know you have brothers yourself, and you've watched your brothers play sports, I'm sure, and it's similar to what I've heard people describe watching their kids play baseball. Like my mom used to talk about how she hated when I pitched because you're that man in the spotlight standing in the middle of the field. pitchers are not that important, just saying. But from my mom's perspective, when I stopped pitching around like seventh or eighth grade, she was very happy to see that I didn't want to do that anymore. And then I was like, but I'm catching now, and I'm more injury prone, and this, whatever, you know. But and the ball could hit me and whatnot. So, but when you were telling that story about Ted and then making that connection to parents watching their kids fail, it reminded me of the stress of watching my brother play baseball because it was, you know, you just wanted him to be successful. You want him to freaking hit a home run or throw somebody out or something like that, and watching them strike out or something was kind of
Yeah.
shitty.
The
It's
most, as a fan, the most invested, or the most emotionally invested I've ever been watching a sport was my youngest brother playing hockey. Now, hockey in general is a lot more of a energetic back and forth, like your will against the opponent, what you're willing to do, and the momentum swings. They're a lot more real and visceral than a sport like baseball. But it's because, it's him and his team, and you're like, oh my God, and the whole sense of competing, I felt it more, and like the stress of it, I felt it more watching him play than I did myself when I was playing,
yeah,
which is, it's just the sense of control.
yeah, 100%. And I definitely get that feeling as a coach. I was talking to players actually this past weekend, last Saturday, about how it feels to have a catcher that you have a lot of confidence in, that it's similar to a breath of relaxation because you're handing the responsibility of the team, out to that catcher, and obviously the rest of the defense too, but predominantly the catcher, and how that can be sort of relaxing. And I'm not saying that these kids were bad catchers forever, but I've definitely had some catchers that were a little bit suspect, and it can be a little bit more stressful when you don't trust them. And even, could go down to any position player. You don't trust your defense. You put in that relief pitcher that is maybe prone to throwing a little bit more balls than strikes sometimes, or maybe gets hit around a little bit, and your starter's starting to run out of gas, and you know who's up next, and you're kind of sitting there thinking to yourself, I really hope this goes well. But it's just so out of your control, like you said, and it's a completely different animal. You get spells of that when you play. You get spells of that when you play a little bit with the games on the line, and you have somebody up that maybe you don't have the most confidence in, but that's out of your control. But it plays into the other side of it, is you being somebody who wants that type of pressure, who wants that type of a situation to come to you. Personality wise, there's not everybody is like that, number one, and not everybody is like that all the time. Sometimes you can have that confidence, and sometimes that can kind of elude you. So
There's definitely an ebbs and flows to it. There are times when you're, again, yeah, feeling confident and, okay, let's do this. I want the responsibility. I want to be there for the guys, and I want to put guys in positions to succeed, and I want to do what's best for them or best for the team. And there's other times where you're just like, man, I'm not ready for this.
yeah, but that's why it really helps when you have teammates that can sort of pick you up. That can add to your confidence, and at the same time just add to the overall confidence of the team. At the end of the day, you want your team to win the game, and it feels really good when you have those types of players in your lineup. And I even say to kids sometimes that you know, I'm sure you understand this, being around so many players. Sometimes this is a big part of why coaching is so fun. You coach a kid or you coach a player that reminds you or has characteristics of an old teammate of yours, and you're like, damn, that guy's just like so and so. He's got ice in his veins, man. Any at bat he gets up and he can just get the job done.
Absolutely. Yeah, going back to those quite a bit of teammates over the course of the years, ones that had different strengths and weaknesses. You realize how much of it's just personalities clashing or gelling, and what the culture of the group can be, and how easily that can be influenced just by the addition or removal of a few people.
Yeah, that's a fun little story, Ted. I'm just the imagery right there was very good, and me knowing Ted personally and having some time around him, I'm just imagining that little dude freaking navigating this whole scenario.
Hmm.
I was
Yeah,
stressed out listening to that, man. I'm not even gonna lie.
I
Pretty.
couldn't. I went through that yesterday, and it was the same. I was coaching, right? And trying to get him to figure it out on his own. I can't tell him. It's actually really cool. Like I can't tell him what to do. I can't give him the instructions beforehand. I can't
I
even
mean,
show him
literally,
myself. Yeah.
literally.
Yeah.
He doesn't
So
know what the hell is going on. He knows
no.
treat and walk and take a dump. You know.
Right. So in the moment, it was coaching, whatever, but it was like emotional, for parts of it. But then last night I was like, I have to tell Dwayne the story, and I couldn't fall asleep because I kept thinking through the story and like how am I going to tell it, and something working on with a mentor of mine was like when you feel like that at night you can't sleep, to like write it down. Part of the reason you're running through it is not because you're so interested in it or focused on it. It's that you worry you're going to forget it. And so I went to wrote it down, just jotted, okay, this, and this. And I look and I was like, it's been an hour since I started thinking about this going to sleep. It felt like 7, 8 minutes, but it's amazing how the mind will run. But yeah, it just shows my excitement for having this conversation with you today.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. I uh, I now have a newfound respect for Ted going through it, going through the gauntlet of the
Yep,
pool. But I listen. I got to give you guys kudos. That is a smart thing to do, being proactive with that whole situation.
absolutely.
You know, which I mean, listen, not to harp on this too long, but that's definitely a good strategy for parents of kids out there is to allow them to experience those types of feelings and those types of failures in certain settings, and also understand that they're going to fail and that's just okay. You know, a lot of kids getting around the college recruitment age and having conversations with parents, a lot of times it ends with me being like, trust that dude, man. Trust that guy. You know, at the end of the day, he's the one standing in the box. He's the one on the mound. You know, he's the one behind the plate, whatever. You got to trust him. So I think that cannot be said enough. Is that you're not the one taking the at bats. You're not the one that's you can be there and you can feel the emotions and everything, but if you're sitting there heightening certain situations, like adding stress to it, or even taking stress away from it, you're kind of taking away from their overall experience and their ability to process those sorts of things. And it is okay. Things are not going to go the way you plan. Things are not going to go the way that you expect. And that's okay because it is all part of the process. And that age old expression of trust the process, you got to live that because so much changes once you step on that college campus without, parent, guardian, sibling, whomever that's there helping you fight your battles. And it can be a little bit daunting when you're stepping on that college baseball field for the first time at your first practice. Like, you don't know anybody, completely alien coaching staff. Um, it can be tough if you don't have that ability to sort of swim effectively to the right exit.
Sure. Actually, as you're saying that, I reminded of another story. It might be a good transition into the upbringing a little bit. So,
Yeah, dude. So let's get after it, dude. I'm like I said before, I'm super pumped to hear the Kyle Brennan origin story.
yeah. So, not exactly the first thing, but a story that came to mind right when you were talking about that. A story that I had lived but forgotten about until I spoke about it with my dad, I don't know, a year ago or something. So we moved into this new house. Uh, I was in fifth grade, fifth, sixth grade, something like that. And you go out to the bus stop, and there'd be a bunch of kids there. And this is pre-cell phone, and at that age, kids didn't have cell phones, so it wasn't like everyone was like now staring at their phone and not communicating. But it was also just kids being shy, and I was new, and I was very shy as a kid. I still am. And my dad is seeing that like I'm not interacting with any of these other kids. And to be honest, I wouldn't have on my own unless I really needed something or someone came up to me. Usually, an extroverted friend would latch on. So what my dad does is he comes out one morning and he brings a football, uh, or baseball, basketball, but I think it was a football. And he starts playing catch with me, and I'm kind of like, Dad, why are you here? But also, I'm young enough where it's also cool to be doing that with your dad. He's not. He took a break from work and came out to the bus stop to come hang out. So he's throwing with me. So from my perspective at the time, I think it's him just playing catch with me to like do something fun. And then he sees some other kids kind of pique interest, and then he throws the ball to one of them, and they kind of catch it, and they're like, I'm part of this," and he's sort of like, "Yeah," and I'm just watching him do this, and then so he starts playing catch with all of us, and then you know how it goes when people join a catch, it goes back and forth, and then you start throwing it to a different guy, and you kind of change the route of it. And after we do this, it was just a pattern. We do it a couple days in a row for a week or something, and as my dad's telling me this story, he's like, "Yeah, like I went out there. It was fun to hang out with you guys." But he said one day you got out to the bus stop before me, and you brought the football to play catch with your new friends. He said, and then he's like, "Once you did that, I stopped going to the bus stop." It was just him curating this environment, like taking something I was good at and liked, and just throwing something back and forth, and him being the facilitator of getting some other kids involved. And then, next thing you know, I was doing it on my own, and it was like, my work here's done.
Mr. Brennan, all-time legend and beast. Just for context.
Yeah, but it was pretty shy as a kid. It was it was good to have baseball because I liked it. I don't want to say I was good at it as, coming up through like elementary school and middle school. I had some talent, but it was clearly not the best kid on the field. Nothing of the sort. Um, I just like doing it. We moved out to Arizona when I was in second grade for a couple of years. My dad had a job transfer, and I had grandparents at the time, and then some aunts and uncles and cousins that lived out there. So we went out there for a little bit, and our neighbor was this former. At the time, I thought he like played professional baseball. I think he was just a fan. They were from Atlanta. They were Braves fans, and that dad coached one of the teams, and the neighbors next door, there was like four boys. Our family has four boys, so, and all similar ages, so it just kind of like worked out perfectly. And so I was I'm the oldest. This other kid was the oldest, so I played on a team with him, and then his dad was the coach. It was like in-house,
Yeah.
but the way they structured it was cool. There was no travel or anything back then, so it was in-house, but it was like the only thing you did. Uh, Pretty good like athletic population in hindsight around there. It was like a developing area. It was in Phoenix or around Phoenix before it like it is today. And but each team was, like we were the Braves because they were from Atlanta and they were Braves fans. Then you have like a different team as the Yankees, a different team as the Red Sox, and you had uniforms that were like the teams. I don't think you could do this anymore. But it was really
Those were
cool.
the
Like,
days.
yeah,
Those were the days.
it felt legit,
Yeah.
and it was in house. I mean, in hindsight, it was probably bad baseball, and half the kids, wearing like the Velcro shoes and the wrong stuff, and just playing in the dirt, picking grass in the outfield. But um, because we were neighbors and friends with the coach, whenever they did some extra stuff in the backyard or whatever, I was just tagging along with them. Uh, and again, I
While you were
want to
kind of going along through that, were you somebody who like was easy to get to the field? Like, was that just something that you felt was exciting to do?
Yeah, um, I like being outside. We had this awesome backyard where they had, I don't even know if this is a thing anymore, but they had this whole grass area, and then around the perimeter was the had like a sidewalk. So you could ride bikes and scooters and rollerblades all in a circle. It was a pretty big yard, especially for out there. So we would do stuff like that, rollerblades and um, riding your bike and playing basketball and having a catch. And it was just like you threw all the stuff out and then you just kind of played with whatever's caught your attention. So then to go and play baseball, um, I just liked it. I don't, yeah, it was easy to do.
And were you
Uh,
somebody that typically watched a lot of baseball, or were you more just like somebody who was getting outside and then happened to start playing this organized in-house type league?
I didn't watch a ton, but I started watching like Sports Center in the morning and they would go through, and I feel like baseball was a lot more popular back then relative to the other sports. So especially during the summer when basketball and football and hockey weren't going, you turn on Sports Center and for the hour, maybe 40 minutes of it was highlights of the game, but it was actually going through the progression of the game. It wasn't now where it's, oh, it's a tie game and Aaron Judge hits a homer. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like, oh, he's so amazing. And then they talk about how good Aaron Judge is and is Aaron Judge the next Jeter and he's a true captain. And then like that's what it is nowadays.
yeah, going to like his metrics and
Right.
stuff
Which
like
is why I
that.
think why none of us pay attention to it.
Yeah,
But back then it was, okay, we're in the first inning. This happens. And then there's this interesting pickoff play. And then there's this rundown. And then there's this ball in the gap. Like, to me, looking through it from a biased, different perspective as a kid, but that was like baseball in its heyday for me personally,
yeah.
because that's when it felt pure. It was, in hindsight, it was like post steroid era. The game
Ish.
wasn't trending in the direction that it is. Yeah, yeah, who's to say? I'm not too up on the history of it, but um, yeah. So it was just like it was watching highlights, but it was situational highlights.
hmm
So you kind of learned about it through that. Um,
The strategy and whatnot. I mean, I definitely think that that era was a little bit more of an emphasis on good fundamental baseball instead of like the superstars of the game. And not to take anything away from those guys, they are obviously the pillars of our game nowadays. But putting up quality baseball, quality fundamental baseball is definitely something that I think helped the overall quality of the game back then, and it was a lot more exciting. I can't believe people feel like they yawn over that stuff nowadays.
mhm.
For me, what I am curious about is, did you have like a guy back then that you like to watch in particular? Did you have somebody that you felt gravitated towards at the professional level that you kind of looked at as an icon or role model?
Not yet. I think that was still pretty young. So we moved back to New York in like fifth, sixth grade, like I had mentioned. And then at that point, travel baseball was a thing. But back then it was if there was five in-house teams, there was one, maybe two travel teams. So you had to actually try out for it. And they cut some kids, and the kids they cut just, you
Played
know,
in house.
played in-house
Yeah.
or,
And that was
try
like
to get an
per
extra.
town, right? So you're talking about each town had like their in-house league and then maybe one travel team for that in-house league.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there may have been one, maybe two teams in the whole region. So for every 15 of those town teams, town travel teams, there might have been one, more like higher level, not tied to a location.
Yeah.
So
Like
yeah, and
private organization, right?
right, yeah, yeah, where you might have had a paid coach and that sort of thing. Um, at that time, we were the Three Village Yankees, which they're not anymore, but it was the
Boo.
district we, the district we grew up in, and they were the Yankees, and we had been Yankees fans all along, so it was just cool. Like I got my name on a Yankees jersey. That was really dope. Um, so then I started to watch, different Yankees, and I remember Jorge Posada was the guy at the time, so it was like okay. But it wasn't really until more like high school where you started to watch guys like Yadier Molina, who was just playing chess when the rest of the league was playing checkers, and then Russell Martin came over to the Yankees and was like, this guy is like a freak athlete.
Yeah.
And I remember he was the one where I remember watching. And I was like, he would just block everything. He was super athletic. I saw videos of him. Now, I'm older now at this point, so probably like 15-ish. And I'm watching videos of him training, and he's training really hard. Like he's training like my perception of at the time was like an MMA fighter or a football like a running back, and he was doing like really athletic things. He wasn't squatting behind the plate, being slow, uh, just throwing the ball back and sort of just being a body.
Yeah.
Like this was a elite athlete, like a
Yeah.
super athletic, versatile dude. And that was when I started to look at players a little bit more in like a role model sense from a like them the player rather than like oh it's just a big guy, a superstar on TV.
Yeah.
Um, so
You started to see that it wasn't because, listen, I mean, I'm going to speak from me personally. We're not too different in age. It was the big guy was thrown behind the plate, and you kind of played everywhere else. Were you always like? I'm sorry to backtrack a little bit, but did you always catch like from that little league era, or did you kind of play everywhere?
right, so in Arizona in that little league, excuse me, little league time, they would rotate the guys, which I think is pretty common. Like you do a game at first and then a game at second. It felt like we played twice a week for the whole summer. I don't know if that's the case, but and then we'd practice here and there. So it was pretty
That
often when we
tracks.
were
I
doing
think that
stuff.
tracks.
Yeah.
Usually, it's like two little league games a week, maybe like a weeknight, and then like a weekend day.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that
It felt
tracks.
like it felt like a lot. Like it was cool. And we would rotate, and it was finally my turn to be behind the plate, and it wasn't like some aha moment, like oh my God, I found my calling, or nothing like that.
I am the catching machine.
Right.
No free ads.
No free heads. Rest in peace. Um, that's my former Instagram handle from back in the
Yeah,
day. I guess we'll get
yeah,
to that at some point. But
yeah. Listen, they have to. We have to let the people in on some of the inside jokes, right?
right. So uh, yeah, so when I caught it wasn't like this big revelation, but kind of through a filtration process, which the catcher position is a filter.
Yeah.
Eventually there'd be so and so didn't want to do it, or hey, it was supposed to be Johnny's turn to do it today, but Johnny's not here. Does anyone want to do it? And immediately, if there's 10 kids, seven of them are not raising their hand. And it wasn't like, hey, pick me. But I was just sort of one of the ones remaining. And I don't even remember if I was like, I'll do it, but I just went and did it. So I got a few extra games just from that. And then when we would go to practice, I ended up catching a little bit more just when we do like defense stuff or like learning how to we weren't even doing like first and thirds or anything yet, but just if the runner steals and he takes a lead, how does this work? And the coach understandably would put me there. So when I came back to be play travel baseball in New York, that was when I sort of said like, hey, I'm a catcher, and I did that more. So I think it
Oh
was
yeah.
from then, but it was more interesting. You got
Yeah.
to do stuff all the time.
Yeah. No,
Um,
listen, because I only asked that because I come at it from a little bit of a different perspective, which we'll obviously get into next week. But like I love hearing the story to becoming a catcher, us being a little bit biased towards that position, you know. So you would you say you became like a full-time catcher by age like when?
11 or 12.
Okay.
It went from
11.
being like something I do here and there to like I'm a I'm a catcher at 11 or 12. And I'd play some infield also because I could. I pitched a little bit if needed. Um, but it was mostly catching. And it's interesting because I wish I had played some infield or done some other things or played outfield like legitimately. Growing up, there was a gap where I was only catching from like 12 to honestly college. And that hamstrung me later because then I had to learn how to field a ground ball. I had to learn how to backpick a certain way. I had for like plays the plate or throwing on the run. Those things I had to have an infield coach teach me at the college level. Where if I had just been doing those things, those types of movements for the past 5 or 6 years, it would have came easier. I was athletic enough where I could learn it, but it was not like it was very robotic from having specialized, not on purpose. It wasn't like a clear decision, but like it is now, where now you're deciding to be a catcher and you're saying no to playing something else that wasn't really, it was more organic for me. But
Hmm. I think that that had some to do with the coaching style of that day, though. You know, like you always got to be from here every time. You know what I mean? I felt like it wasn't encouraged, the whole creative aspect of it. You know, and we'll get into this a little bit later as we get into the later part of your story. You know, I'm sure you'll talk about how maybe lacking that experience as a younger catcher has influenced your approach to coaching certain catchers nowadays, because I know it definitely has for me.
sure. Yeah, we'll get into that later, but it definitely made watching Russell Martin or someone like Yadier or these other guys just a lot more interesting
Yeah,
because
dude.
uh, they weren't just, and not to say that the big league catchers back then were overweight and sluggish or anything like
Mm-mm.
that, but the way that their strategy to catching, their approach to catching, just from that era was different. Where it was, you're set up, you're going to catch the ball. There wasn't a whole lot of manipulating or none of that yet. Maybe the ones that were really good would try to stick it. Actually, Chris Stewart was on the Yankees also. He was a very good career backup catcher, but a very good defender. And he like moved different. He received really well. I remember noticing that. Um, but yeah, kind of bringing in that different era of the position was so intriguing because it just wasn't what you had watched. At least it wasn't what I had perceived
Yeah,
at
and
that
then
age.
when you see guys do different stuff, you're like, oh my God, this guy's catching on a knee. And then you're like, wow, that's pretty cool. And then you start to see the whole approach to the position start to evolve, which for me was really cool.
Oh, no doubt. So yeah, went
So
up and oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, so you start to break into travel baseball. What's like? Is there a part in your mind where you start to tell yourself that you're taking it more seriously? Like it seems like you took those steps sort of naturally, in the form of watching some catchers like Russell Martin and Yachty. You seem like you're watching organized baseball a little bit more, less in the regional sense, more in like a national scale, because you're starting to see yourself, okay, I am a catcher. I'm going to watch what some of these guys do. You're making a conscious effort to improve yourself. Like, was that something that you felt? Was that something that you were aware of, or is that just kind of some sort of natural progression for you?
So once I started travel ball and I was in the like 11, 12, 13, 14 age range, I was pretty good at it. I say pretty good, meaning from a travel baseball in the Northeast at that age, in a fairly local sense, the quality of play is not super high. So amongst that, I was above average, where I was definitely one of the better few guys in the team, but I was definitely not the best player on the team, for really any team I was on. And I liked baseball a lot. I was taking it serious in my interest for it, and I would go outside and play catch or be interested in certain things like that, but I was certainly not working at it. It was very much show up and go to practice, enjoy it, do what I'm told, and have fun and play. But I wasn't. If I was taking extra swings in the backyard, it was because I saw something on TV and I was like, "Ooh, that seems fun," and I went outside and practiced. And then if it when it wasn't fun, I stopped. And then if I wasn't motivated to do that for the next couple of days, I just didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was definitely not a disciplined hunger to getting better at that age. And around like 14-ish, which is a very difficult transition. That age roughly is a difficult transition for uh, most boys. And I had my talent was essentially running out. Like I was no longer, I was probably better than average, but I was not excelling, and I was starting to regress in relative to the rest. Um, I was
What
a little
told you
bit
that?
more. What?
Like what were some things that told you that? Because, for obviously some of our listeners, it can appear in certain ways, whether that's the at bat results, speed, strength. Guys are obsessed. I'm not expecting you to talk about exit velocity, but how hard the ball is coming off the bat. Maybe defensive capabilities, situational awareness. Like, what does that look like? What did that look like to you?
Most of it was physical. I was a little bit chubby. I wasn't. I mean, I was getting a little bit stronger because I was going through puberty and all that, but I wasn't. I was trending towards one of the overweight, um, like weaker kids. Not this. I wasn't overweight and I wasn't weak, but like you can imagine that kid that's 14 or so, and he's like bigger, but not. He's like got some skill a little bit, but is like okay, he's either about to start growing or he needs to eat better and train better. And it was all of those things for me, I think. So there were some other catches that had started to lift, or maybe they returned a little bit quicker. I definitely developed a little bit later. Like I was always taller because we're family's tall, um, but from a physical development sense, like I was younger compared to my grade, probably by like 6, 8 months or so. So that played a difference. And then just from like a developmental sense, it was a little bit uh, slower, maybe like a probably biologically like a year or so behind a lot of the other
Mm-hmm.
kids. So sort of between all those things, there were some other kids. I actually played with that one summer, Mike Rizzatello, who you know and have coached with,
Love
and
Mike.
he was like shredded, training a ton. He was going hitting lessons, like he knew what he was doing in the swing. He blocked balls, like he like think he was just all the things I wasn't. I was just tall and had some talent.
Yeah, man.
My
Credit
my
to
arm was
him.
pretty good.
Credit to him. He did stuff like that at a young age.
And he really
Yeah,
did.
he did.
I,
He did. Like, I listen, not to glaze you too much, Mike, if you ever happen to listen to this. Um, but he was that guy that was going to hitting lessons regularly. He was that guy that just took it a little bit more seriously from a young age, and it showed. And it showed. He was the guy that in high school, when you're an underclassman, because Mike's a couple of years older than me, he's like sitting on the bench, like working on the direction of his swing, which I was just like, what the hell is this guy doing?
hmm
So,
Yeah, I
so good,
remember that.
good for you, Mike.
So that team, I wouldn't have brought this up, but it's good that we get into this flow because we could talk about this. So there's this team. We were 14 years old. We had our coach was a former minor league catcher, and Ron Braun, who I later actually coached his son. That was pretty cool. But he was his coach, and he was uh, very intense. He had really high expectations for us. He would get mad easily, but he was really good. Like the quality of information he knew was so much higher than what the rest of us had been exposed to. On that team was myself, Mike, that catcher we were just referring to. We had Chris Gaffney, who ended up catching at Tampa. We had
Another
Anthony
stud.
Kay, who's a big league pitcher. He's pitching in
Another
Japan right
stud.
now still. He's 30 years old and getting paid over $1 million a year to pitch. We had some other Alex Vargas was another one. He pitched professionally. So like we had a lot of guys on that team, and I was on the bottom end of talent on that team, and I was starting to fall behind those kinds of players. So
Mm-hmm.
like the kids that ended up going on and playing legitimate college baseball or even professionally were starting to go put, I was staying put and they were starting to leave in terms of their development. Um, and
Just
I went,
quickly, because I, I cannot stress this enough. Like, you're talking about analyzing the people around you, and there's 2 points I want to make. Number one, you've assessed this yourself by watching the players around you. You're saying that this guy's better than me, this guy's better than me, this guy's better than me. That is so important. Like, I cannot stress this enough. Like, I know that I understand, and so I apologize for interrupting there, but like, You have to be able to do that as a younger player, especially you're talking about 14 years old, right? Like
Hmm.
was that around the age group? Okay,
Yep.
so when you get to that age, guys, and you're watching or parent that you're listening to this, you have to be able to do this. I'm not saying that you need to focus, your focus needs to be on these people, but there has to be a step back and an assessment of what's going on around you and who these other players are, what they're doing, because that tells you where you are, you know. And then number two, the second point I'm going to make is you made that analysis, and I'm sure you're about to get into this, but you then chose to compete with those guys. You chose to make adjustments, it sounds like, to your training because, you know, I know a little bit about how this story plays out, but you made those adjustments to your training. You made these adjustments to your approach to the game, it sounds like, based on these assessments, which is so important because nowadays it is this guy's my son's better than this guy, even though he isn't, which is fine. It's okay because we're talking about a guy who at 14 is maybe not as good as some of these guys. Still, his story turns out pretty good baseball wise. And instead of me saying my son's better than this guy in a delusional way and moving teams, you allowed your kid, just like Ted in the pool, to compete for that job. You know what I'm saying? Like again, like I apologize for jumping in there, but like I have to hit on those kinds of points because it is so important to be able to do that. I feel like that is something that is lost in our games and in our game these days, you know?
Yeah. Well, you're right about the awareness part. And it wasn't like, oh, I'm falling behind these guys. Let me start working hard. It
Mm,
didn't go that way. It
okay.
eventually did, but it wasn't. Um, you know, to your point, I was the third catcher. It wasn't like I was recruited to that team to be the third catcher, but I was the third best catcher. There's really no way around that. I had, uh, broke my ankle earlier that year, so I missed the spring, and I was playing with them in the summer, so I wasn't really up to speed catching yet. But even if I was, like, I was clearly the third best out of those guys, and so I was playing a lot of first because playing first base on turf. We started to play a lot of games. That was about 50-50 on turf back then, but wood bat, 14 years old for the first time. It's not hard to play first base. You basically just wait for the ball to get to you, catch it, and step over. And catching the ball from the infielders, I was good at that because I've been a catcher, and then I learned to pick through it. So I got pretty good with that. Um, Having no concept at the time of in how not valuable the first base position is defensively compared to the other ones, and what that infers. These are things I learned about once I got in the pro ball. Like, if you're going to play first base, you have to be the best hitter on the field.
Yeah, period.
Right. Be if you want to stick around the game. So I was
Yeah.
playing, and I wasn't aware of this at the time. I didn't know any of this. I was playing first base. I liked it because it was kind of like catching, where every time a ball got put in play to the infielder, you were part of it. I wasn't making the difficult play. I wasn't the best athlete. I wasn't doing the thing, but whether it got hit to third, short, second, I was involved. Or if a ball went to the outfield, there was a man on second base. Like, I was just involved, which I liked. Um, so yeah, around that time I was a lot chubbier. Definitely not putting a lot of effort into it. Uh, the injury kind of sidelined me. It was easy to procrastinate and just kind of sit around and be like, well, I can't do anything because I'm on crutches, or I can't do what I'm supposed to do. So instead, let's just do nothing and kind of wait. That was the mindset. It's a very easy mindset to fall into, by the way, when you're going through an injury. We'll get into that later, but and then there was like this. It wasn't depression or anything like that, but there was this lull during that time where it was like, my identity as a kid who plays baseball isn't. Uh, I'm not succeeding in it like I used to. I'm not just good because I'm good, which was the case earlier. Just liking it and showing up and playing wasn't enough. Like, I didn't know how to block a baseball. I didn't know how to catch the right way. I didn't know throwing footwork to second was like a foreign concept. It seemed so difficult and awkward. Just didn't have the strength for it. I was growing. So I remember what happened. I do remember my dad was frustrated with me. I had a very but had a very good relationship with my dad in the sense that if I struggled as a player, or if I went 0 for 4, if I made two errors, I didn't get in the car, and he didn't let me hear it. He wasn't complaining about how I underperformed. It was none of that. Uh, he's an entrepreneur. He's very former engineer, entrepreneur, been in the military, so he's got like a very specific mindset about him.
Stud.
We'd we'll get him on the podcast at some point. He leads a couple hundred people, so it'll be a good conversation despite being dad.
He's an
But
absolute stud.
so we will where's I headed with that? So we get back in the car, and it wasn't there are two things he didn't do. The first thing, he wasn't like, I'm so sorry you had a tough day. I'm here for you. It wasn't that. So but it wasn't, why do you suck? You shouldn't be swinging at that pitch. You're doing it wrong. It was, what are we going to do to get better? And I didn't want to hear it as a kid, because that required me to do something beyond my comfort zone, which was to seek instruction or to go into a gym or to do these things. Uh, the barrier wasn't out that I was afraid to do effort, to put forth effort, or that I wanted to improve. It was just uncomfortable to embark on those things. To go to your first hitting lesson with some stranger, to be told that you're not good at something, to go into a different environment, to you have to change your identity in order to make those shifts, the way you perceive yourself. If you don't view yourself as someone who trains uh, physically, or someone who practices certain thing, in order to do those things, you have to become someone else, and that dissonance is a very uncomfortable process to go through. I don't remember exactly how I got started into training and all that, but I remember eventually, I don't know, we joined like Planet Fitness. We had been in other gyms, in hindsight, much better gyms than Planet Fitness, but we started to go to Planet Fitness, and I'd go with my dad at first, and then I would go on my own, have parents drop me off. And I would just go. I don't, I think the motivation was to just, uh, get better arms, and to look jacked, essentially, not knowing anything about how or what the different, that guy that looks jacked, he's on steroids. That guy that looks good in a picture, if he turns around, his back's weak or doesn't train legs. Like, these aren't things you know about. You have to figure those out. At least back then, you had to figure them out
Not a
because,
bad place to start, though. I just want to get jacked.
yeah. So that was the goal. And honestly, for a kid at that age, if you're doing something, whether it's, I want to do cardio to get shredded, or I want to uh, I want to lift so I can, look good. Doing those things is comparison to not, but then also doing those things at that age, you can do almost anything, and you're going to improve at everything
Mm.
at that age.
Quickly, too.
Yes, and it's good that it's like that, because when you start to train, and if you can get through the first week or two or three at that age, the way you feel, but also what you can perform, is noticeably different from 3 weeks ago. So it's like, oh, and then it becomes addicting, and then your relationship with it changes. It's kind of like you want the next thing, you want the next thing, and this is around 15 years old. Started going to the gym more. We were the travel team we were with did some like winter clinic where you have the catchers work with a catching coach for, I don't know, half hour or something, and you'd start to work on blocking. You'd start to work on these different things, and I do some of that. And I learned that if there was a group of people and we were being pushed to do something, I wasn't going to quit at it amongst the group. So that kind of helped push through some different barriers. And then I would try some things on my own. And I'd see a video of like Giancarlo Stanton doing a landmine rotation. And so I'm in the gym trying to do the same thing because I read online that it improves baseball power. So, okay, now I'm doing these landmine twists thinking I'm going to hit more home runs, or just hit the ball hard. Definitely wasn't hitting any home runs, but uh, starting
Don't
to do these
expose
things.
yourself like that yet, please.
Yeah. So, uh, it just kind of all swirled together. It was just, momentum started to build, and then it was, uh, stuff in the diet, like the kitchen and eating. And uh, I thought I was eating too much because I was thicker. Part of me being thicker was I would just eat poor food after school some days, and then wasn't training a lot. And I was also, in hindsight, staging to grow a lot, which again I was always tall, but just to grow more. And so I started uh, eating better, just being way more particular with it, and then training, and then so it all started to fuel together. So that, yeah, it wasn't a simple cause and effect. Like, oh, I wasn't the best guy on the team anymore, and I said, you know what? I looked in the mirror and said, you got to be better, and then I started training. Like, that's just not how it went. I don't think
Mm,
that's how it really ever goes.
correct.
People might tell the story. If I tell the story another 12 times, it might be, I woke up one morning and said to myself, God, please. Like,
Today's the day.
yeah, it wasn't like that. Uh,
But
But
with that being said, though, did you have a goal in mind? Like you're talking 14, 15 now.
mm,
Are you starting to think like college baseball? Are you trying to like start as a varsity catcher at this point? Are you like a JV guy, varsity guy? Because you're what, ninth, 10th grade now?
they were separate from each other, meaning my motivations in the gym didn't have a whole lot to do with baseball. I wasn't, when I was in the gym, I identify as a baseball, like my identity is a baseball player. I obviously want to get better at all that, but I wasn't thinking about on-field success when I was training. I was thinking about just the physical, like it was separate for me.
Okay.
Like if I didn't play baseball and I was just some kid that got into training at the gym, like that was more my experience. It obviously helped with baseball, and I wanted to prove it stuff. But if I was out running, I wasn't thinking to myself, I'm gonna run 2 or 3 miles or get fast at a mile, so that way I can run faster, stealing second or something. Like that wasn't I didn't relate the two. It was, I just wanted to be like peers of mine that were good at these things.
Yeah.
If I saw a kid that was on the track team that was really fast and lean and explosive, I was like, oh, I want to be like that. And if I saw some football player that was strong and that could bench a lot, like I wanted to be like that. It was very peer oriented, um, in a non social media kind of way. It was just who you saw around you. As far as baseball goes, the catching stuff, this is pre-catcher metrics. So yeah, it was just sort of, I'm a catcher and this is the position I play and this is kind of what they're making me do. But it wasn't, I didn't think I was gonna catch on varsity. I didn't think I was gonna play in college. If you asked me when I was 5 or 6 what you want to be when you grow up, I would have told you a baseball player. But it wasn't like that dream was burning inside of me
Yeah.
growing up. It was
Yeah.
just, I was a kid that played baseball, and um, I was just caught in the middle of, I like this, but I'm not doing enough to get better at it. And so, um, yeah, it wasn't until a little bit later once I got into the Catchmetrics program, we could talk about that. And then once I got involved I played for the varsity team in one of the falls as a 10th grader, uh, ninth grader. Um, this is common for high schools to do, where they'll have like a fall practice and you'll have the JV and the varsity kids, and kind of whoever shows up, will mix it and play. The younger kids will play in the third inning of the second game of a doubleheader. And being around older players, and it wasn't until then where uh, the peers I'm surrounded with were older and at a higher level, where that kind of pushed me.
Yeah. Which I think is really interesting, because I'm going to be that voice throughout this pod today specifically, where I'm trying to draw connections to the athlete nowadays too. I got guys talking to me about college baseball when their kids freaking 11, 12 years old. I'm like, dude, what are we talking about? Kids talking about varsity at bats when they're in 7th and 8th grade, ninth grade. And I'm like, the focus is just in such an interesting and different place than when we were younger. Again, I'm not saying that people didn't have those sorts of aspirations from our generation and generations prior, but it's just interesting to hear your perspective. Again, me knowing you personally and knowing the kind of success you've had in this game, to listen to your perspective as a younger athlete, as a JV varsity athlete now. You know, I think it's
Right.
just important to hammer down on this though. Like you got to stay focused on where you're at. And I'm not giving you that much credit. I don't think that you were like, I got to stay focused on where I am. Like you were just doing. You know, you were just doing. I'm in the
Yeah, it
gym. I'm
wasn't
lifting.
intentional.
Yeah, no, I understand that completely. Um, but I think exposure nowadays, like social media and whatnot, can cause that to just linger in the back of somebody's mind. So it has to be a little bit more of a conscious decision for today's athlete to, when you're in the gym, be in the gym. You know, when you're lifting, like lift. When you're, in the classroom, be in the classroom. Like not everything is about baseball. Not everything is about improving your baseball stuff. Like, yes, these things can be beneficial to you, but you need to be well rounded as a person and as an individual, you know,
It is much harder for kids nowadays. So like
100%.
Facebook, around the time I'm referring to, these like 14, 15-ish years was like right when Facebook was starting to get really popular. And uh, I had an account, but like the people you would see were only the only things that you would see would be posted by someone you knew that you requested. So like we didn't know each other. There was no way for me to see you unless I sent you a friend request somehow. So you knew people you went to school with and people you played with. And if maybe someone liked the page and then you clicked on that and then you saw something, but really what you saw was stuff from the internet that you went and searched actively. So if you posted a video of you training and waking up early and doing all these things, there was no way for me to see it unless I
Yeah.
knew you.
Which was
So you
not very
weren't
common then either. It was more mirror selfies and,
right, yeah, if that, or just a status and stuff. So it was easy to compartmentalize things because that's just the way it was. Um, so you go to the gym and you're listening to music that you only discovered that you found on your own, and then you're watching guys at the gym and you're focusing on them because they're the only ones that you see. You're not watching, or if you find some YouTube video of some guy training, okay, but you had to search for that on your own. So it was it was different. It's hard to say if it was better or worse. Parts of it were a lot better. But at the same time, the things that we were doing in the gym and the things that we weren't doing or focused on because we didn't know any better was because we didn't have the like the awareness of what was beyond our immediate zones we put ourselves in. Um, so, but yeah, back to bring dad back into it. He obviously was aware of all of these things that what you experience and who you're around make a big difference. So he would uh, convince me or just sign me up for these different uh, clinics. One of them was the Catchometrics clinic, which will come up where it's a whole. It was revolutionary for the time. It was a giant catcher only clinic run by catching coaches, which was much less common back then. And it would be an hour and a half or 2 hours of training the catcher position specifically, which was again uh, not commonplace at all.
blasphemy.
Yeah, so he signed me up for things like that. He would want me to go to different gyms to train in for baseball stuff. I said no again because I was afraid to go out of the comfort zone or to do all that. But a lot of the things was him putting me into those different situations. I told the story to a parent of someone that we both have worked with, and it was like I didn't fall in love with baseball because of my dad. Um, the reason I wanted to get better at these things the internal motivation, the desire to improve, all of this did not come from my dad. I mean, I probably get those abilities from him a little bit, but the spark, the motivation to do all this didn't come from him. It came from these other people. It came from certain coaches we've had, Tom Downing, Chris Reyes, who we'll have on the show eventually. Um, High school coach, we might have Lou Petrus, we might have him on. So these that'll be a treat. So these different coaches and these different experiences and these people I interacted with were the reasons that kind of fueled this. But the only reason I interacted with those people was because my dad put me in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a good lesson in there of a good parent-son relationship with a lot of this. Uh, so yeah,
There's a
it's
fine
been
line. There's a fine line. And again, I'm us not being parents ourselves. It's based on our own personal experience with our fathers, which it sounds like we're both lucky enough to have good experiences with our dads in baseball. But we've definitely witnessed as players and as coaches some situations where, again, probably not intentionally, but it's maybe hurt a player's overall experience. So
absolutely. Yeah, we've played with them. We've seen it as coaches now. A lot of parents that mean well and have good intentions, but end up um, they take the purity away from the player, away from him. Or what I mean is, it's not. It should be the player's experience.
yeah,
Um, and my all of my experiences are not possible without my dad, and they're obviously facilitated by him. But they were mine, which is I think part of the reason that, and I think you've had a similar experience where we're still doing things like this today because they were our journey.
yeah,
We don't deserve credit for having the successes or the experiences of the journey because they wouldn't have happened without help. But the path was still ours. It wasn't um, clouded or overshadowed, or um, no one was living vicariously through me, which is uh, super fortunate for,
yeah. I was
grateful
definitely
for.
grateful enough to have some like check-ins too. It's like, dude, like this is for you, man. Like at any point, like if you don't want to do this, there can be anything else. There can be literally anything else. But if you're gonna do this, do it the right way. You know.
So to get back to what you had asked earlier, was there a goal in mind? Once I was like sophomore in college, it was or even a freshman. I was like, okay, I'm gonna play in college one day. Like I'm good enough amongst my peers where this is something that's attainable for me. I didn't have thoughts of like what level or where, or what any of that meant, but it was like, okay, this is a thing. I'm working at it, taking things seriously. What I'm doing from when I wake up to when I go to bed is centered around school and baseball and all that. So uh, then things started to come together where the training was for this goal of playing college one day and just being an older, bigger, stronger, just better player. And through that. And then it became so it was interesting. It's kind of a recurring theme for me that, believe it or not, the first person that told me that I would probably play college baseball was my mom, which is interesting because my mom has not had much of a direct influence on my baseball career. Wonderful mom, has been supportive along the way and all that, but it wasn't like, oh, mom thinks I should go to this school instead of this one, or mom doesn't like that coach. Like she wasn't in that role. But she was like, oh, you're probably going to be doing this in college. And I'm kind of like, really? Like, hadn't thought of that. And then once I was a junior in, or sorry, once I was heading into my senior year of high school, another coach, Brian Anderson, who we've both worked with, was like, you might be a guy who gets drafted one day if you continue to work at these things. Other coaches could see that from the physical uh, talent that I had, and then from the work ethic and other things, like I had a chance. And I was like, oh, Okay, so then that was in the back of my mind that, one day play professional baseball and get to that achievement, and then that started to fuel everything. So it was good during those years because the goal I had, the aspirations were two or three levels past the level I was currently at.
Mm-hmm.
And not that I was thinking about playing professional baseball as if I had any idea what that was like when I was 16 or 17, but it was like that North Star was far enough away where it helped guide some of the decisions I eventually made. Um, so yeah, it was that was the goal eventually, was to play at a high level in college and then maybe beyond and whatnot. Um, but those all came to fruition pretty late, especially in today's terms.
You're talking about around like 15, 16.
To play in college was like 15, 16. To to play professionally was probably like 17.
Okay. So we're talking like now
Yeah.
junior, senior year in high school.
Yeah. In terms of like goals and aspirations and motivations for things. Uh, so there was a shift during those years. Because like me as a 16 or 17-year-old, my personality was pretty much the same. I wasn't like a different person or anything, but the way I was going about life was much different then compared to when I was younger.
A catching nerd, for sure.
Yep.
A baseball nerd.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for some context, me being somebody a couple like a little bit younger than Kyle, and getting to getting to watch him, it was your perception of him with it was just like a stud. You know what I mean? Like you're seeing this dude who's just a bigger guy. I got to see Kyle a little bit through the metrics lens. I don't know if we went to metrics at the same time, but and then especially in college, we would kind of work out sometimes at the same indoor facility. He'd be down there working out. So that was kind of the perception of him, just this big dude in you know, this big dude in catcher's gear, really tall catcher, guy that looked like he knew what he was doing. Um, but for some context now from your personal experience, it just sounds like a guy that was figuring it out. So even for somebody like yourself, who from an outsider's perspective, the guy looks like he has his stuff kind of in line. It's still forming like your whole scheme for what it is that you want to be doing with baseball, which is interesting.
Yeah. I don't think at any point at any of those steps, you know, getting onto varsity and then playing in college and then after and coaching and any of these endeavors did my experience of it be like, oh, I'm the man and I got this figured out.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times players, it's more the private side, the amateur guys I work with, um, they see relative to them like a finished product. Again, we don't consider ourselves the finished product, but if you're 14 years old and some professional baseball coach and catching coach comes down and he's this and that and he's helping lead a clinic and he's doing all these things, it can seem like that was the guy all along, and it's just so not the case. Actually, I remember when I was looking at different colleges, one of them I looked at was Stony Brook, which is a Division I school that's 10 minutes from where I grew up. That ended up going to the College World Series on this crazy Cinderella story. One of the players was Pat Cantwell, who we may end up getting a conversation with on here. But um, he, I was in high school and he was a junior, senior, depending on when I went and visited at Stony Brook, and like watching these guys compete and play. They're 4 or 5 years older than you are. They're doing something at a higher level. They're physically so much more developed just after years of training, and then also just being, uh, older. The difference between a 16-year-old and a 22-year-old is immense. And watching these guys, and you're like, oh man, these are these are people that have things figured out so much further beyond you, and your perception is that they were like that when they were your age. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe in some senses they were, things that strengths of someone else when they're 22 are probably things they're also fairly good at 16. But it's very easy to look at someone who's in a role model position, or especially if they're older, to just think that they are, you know, they've got it figured out, and it's just not the
Yeah.
case.
Listen, that can even get into the identity conversation too. Like, there's some guys that as players have been studs their whole lives, and then they get to the end of their baseball player experience, and some guys don't do too well with that whole transitional period. And that could mean a number of things. I'm not necessarily talking about one type of experience. It could be something as simple as like, man, I just freaking miss being a player, and it could be something as complex as kind of feeling like a loss of identity. But it's just there are different there's changes is kind of what I feel like you're describing. Is there's changes in your relationship to your experience around baseball and athletics. Um, Even now, I feel like we're doing something completely new with our experience with the whole baseball thing. I just because I kind of see where this transition is going. Now we're kind of getting to the high school age slash maybe starting to break into college baseball a little bit. Is there any just because this is something that I love talking about, and I know I will a little bit next week. But are there any quality travel baseball experiences that you'd like to touch on? Anyone that specifically sticks out in your mind?
Hmm.
Whether it was like were you a guy that went away a lot? Were you a guy that had like a fun trip to Diamond Nation? No free ads, Diamond Nation, but we've all been there. Um, is there anything that sticks out to you? Playing at the Jack Cuss Field with the bouncy Astro turf.
Actually, I'm glad you bring this up because I would have glossed over it. I forgot. I
That's what I'm here for,
I don't I
baby.
don't have a I don't have a yes. I don't have a travel baseball story that is like, oh, we did this one thing, we beat this team, and then we had a party in the hotel. Like I don't have one of those in particular that comes to mind. But actually, my most impactful travel baseball story slash experience was my junior summer, which back then your junior summer was when you got recruited. It's kind of changed. You got kids
Yeah.
recruiting earlier, the timeline shifts, but back then it was you played your junior season if you're in the spring with your school team. If you were good, people would come look at you then, but really it was during the summer where you committed or not, or the early fall, um, early fall of your senior year of high school. About 2 weeks into that summer, I had made this this travel team called the Long Island Titans, which back then there was two teams per age group, and it was the best, like, un, uh, not debatable. It was the best team to play for on Long Island. I made the second team uh, for that junior year age group, that 17U. So that
The
was huge.
blue and gold, right?
Yeah, they switched the colors, but yeah, it was one of those. And so, and this is like the best guys on the island are on this team. It was like, kind of like an all-star team. Um, so I was super proud of that. Get on, and now I'm gonna go get recruited. And based on my skill set as a catcher, as a hitter, and then me as a student, I was gonna be a Northeast lower level Division 1, but very good academic school kind of a player, um, where I could catch at the upper level, upper mid major level, um, probably more of a Division 2, like a stock Division 2 hitter. And student, I was a good student where I could, between that and baseball, I could get into some pretty good schools.
I believe they call that an academic weapon.
Si, senor. So yeah, I head in there. We're at Diamond Nation playing in a uh, in one of these tournaments, and there's a bunch of schools. I think Cornell was coming to watch me, and then Stony Brook was also there, and then a couple other teams were there that weekend. I don't know if they were going to look at me or not. There's a swinging bunt, like a man on first and second, 2 outs or something. Uh, the swinging bunt rolls up the third base line. I go to pick it up. I decided not to turn and face and do like the spin move and face the third base dugout, pick it up, and then turn and throw to first. It was kind of in front of me. So I pick it up, grab it, go to spin and throw. And as I'm like at layback and my arm's starting to come through, my knee just explodes and it dislocated. It got caught in the turf. I had a history of these they're called subluxations where the kneecap kind of slips out a little bit and then slides right back in, but then the surrounding joint gets stretched too much and it's not good. So I had that. The kneecap just completely, like, my lower leg stays planted in the ground, my upper leg keeps turning, and I fall to the ground. I remember, like, I to this day I don't completely remember the sensation of the knee injury. I mean, I kind of remember it, but I remember the throw, which is wild. But I remember the throw. It left my hand at probably 42 miles an hour because I had fallen underneath, and I was just on the ground, and my knee was dislocated. Like, I knew it happened, and apparently the it was like the softest one hop to first. I got him out somehow, but
Beast.
I'm on the ground, and I'm looking at my glove, and it's it's so interesting how, if you look at a baseball, like someone who's played for a while, whether you're still playing or not, you look at a baseball, you look at a certain glove, and it's more than just the object. It's like you feel your experience with it flashing through. Like, when I look at a baseball, it's like there's an emotional, like, spiritual connection when I touch it that's different than if I pick up something else. With that glove, it was all the training and the catching stuff and whatever from the previous couple of years. And I'm looking at it, and my, my knee was hurt. And for some reason, I thought it was appropriate to take the glove off and launch it. So I dislocate my knee. No one knows. I just fell to the ground and made like this weird throw. We got him out. The inning ended, but it was like, what? I'm on the ground. And then I take my glove, and it was just like all the baseball stuff. And I was just pissed. And I threw it however far, like as far as I could. I was laying there on the turf in Diamond Nation with my knee dislocated for, I don't know, 20 minutes until the ambulance came, and I went off in that. Um, had to get surgery on it, a big extensive surgery that they don't do for that type of injury anymore. But ended up being like 6 months until I was able to catch and kind of hit and play a little bit, and more like 9 months until I was able to do everything unrestricted, but not really for like another 15 or 18 months after, where I was just like, okay, like, yeah, my knees, I had surgery on it. It's not great. It's stiff, but like, I don't have to think about it, kind of a thing. And probably couldn't have happened at a worse time, because that was when I'm supposed to get recruited. And how am I going to play college baseball if teams can't see me?
Yeah.
So every Division I school was like, we're not saying we're out on you because you got hurt, but we're not committing to a kid without seeing them play. Uh, okay, so that was kind of off the table. Um, I had a lot of Division III schools that were like, "Hey, we've seen video of you before you got hurt, and as long as, like, the doctor says you're going to be good, you can come to our school. We'll help you get in academically, and you'll catch for us in a year or two." Johns Hopkins was one of those. So that's where I was supposed to go. I ended up deciding to go to them. Um, but that whole time was extremely difficult because I'm now, like, can't train, not sure if I'm going to be able to play in college or if I'm going to be able to catch the same. And that was uh, a whole experience, which uh, I'm grateful for now, because it ended up giving me perspective on something I would eventually do, which is work with rehabbing players, guys that are going through the same kind of thing at the pro level, and then having to go through that whole rehab process and whatnot. But so yeah, that thing, that was my most memorable and impactful travel experience was that injury. Um, yeah, I'm not sure where you want to head from there. It's kind of a lot to.
No, listen, I think that's I don't think there can be a story that's more impactful from that than that for you in particular. And I know you've talked about to me in extents some of the injuries you've experienced, and I believe what do you have like another one or two in the career that kind of yeah. So that was probably like the first big one for you, right?
Yeah,
Other than you, would you with your ankle, you said, right?
yeah, I broke my ankle, but it was being a
Yeah,
cast for six
young.
weeks, and then
Yeah.
yeah, kind of do some physical therapy for a couple weeks and kind of get at it. But yeah, that knee one was the most extensive and the most impactful. I had some other injuries later on. Like I had a hamate removal, which is it's a surgery, but it's about as easy of a surgery as you can get. Recovery is pretty straightforward. I broke another wrist, but I mean those are pretty minor compared to the knee.
Yeah, I mean, and also it's not even just the fact that it was your knee, and I mean, like you talked about, it's not really a surgery that they do anymore for these types of injuries, but it's also the timing. You know, the timing can be very discouraging. And me personally, I've had some teammates of mine experience injuries at a similar time and also deal with a similar situation to what you're talking about, where they had Division 1 talent, Division 1 prospects, and were pretty much told like, "Hey, kid, like, your body's good. You look like an athlete. We've seen footage. We got coaches that are vouching for you here, but we want to see you play. We don't know what this is going to look like." So for you, did that? It it seems like you had your safety net. You had your validation that you'd be getting to play college baseball, or at least have a chance to at Johns Hopkins. So I'm sure that was definitely a little bit of a sigh of relief. But
Yeah, so uh, that whole story. So there was a bunch of schools like Ivy League schools where if they really wanted me, I was good enough academically where they could kind of get me in, but I would not have gotten into those schools on my own.
mm-hmm.
Um, and Johns Hopkins was one of those. I mean, that school is incredible. And I think I had like a 90 something average and a 1260 SAT. So good student, but not that kind of a level.
Yeah,
But because they were so interested in me, because they were basically getting a upper level Division 2 or lower level Division 1 player to go play at Johns Hopkins for them um, at an important position, they were like, "Hey, we'll help you get in, but we can only do that if you apply early decision. Like you're coming to us, and we'll be able to get you financial aid, and we'll get you accepted. I mean, that's the biggest thing." So at the time, that was like a $62,000 school,
yeah.
which was as expensive as it could get back then. I don't even want to know what they are now, but
And at that
um,
point, did you know what you wanted to do, like professionally, what you wanted to study?
so I was good at math and science. I mean, those were I was good, not great. I was comfortable with those. And I in middle school, high school, was really interested in cars. Just driving them. I did some work on them, like change my dad's oil or rotate tires, like those kinds of things. I did auto tech, so I was interested in those things. So I intended to be a mechanical engineer. So I went to school for that initially. And I eventually went to Buffalo, but I was going to do that at Johns Hopkins and trying to find a school where you could be an engineering student, which is a full time job in itself, and then also be a student athlete. And it was just, uh, it was a lot to try to figure out how to balance those two things. And essentially, the only way to do those two is to just have a ridiculous work ethic and be extremely good with your time
Mm-hmm.
and all that, and to just be. They say in college you have your social life, your academics, and your sport. As a student athlete, those three things, they say you got to pick two.
Yeah.
Like if you're all baseball and social life, you're not going to do well in school. If you're going to study all day and then party with your buddies, like you're probably not going to be very good at the sport. So I was clearly going to pick the academic and the baseball side of it. Uh, but so I get in the Hopkins, and I went down and I loved it. I mean, the campus is beautiful. The team was very good. I mean, you guys have played them currently. Sorry about it. I actually am because I'm a fan of Hopkins.
You're a big
But
St. Joe's baseball fan, so
oh yeah, St. Joseph's University on Long Island is my favorite college baseball. Actually, college team
period.
across all sports. Yes. Uh, no free ads. So I'm I get accepted, or they tell me you're going to get accepted. Like
This
everything
is
good?
still
Yep, everything's
Hopkins,
good.
right?
Yes, and this is in like November-ish. So I apply early decision. I didn't actually commit, but it was basically my commitment
Hmm.
because you can't undo that.
And sorry to
So
cut you off again, but November of your senior year in high school, right?
yes,
Okay.
so committed. I'm not fully at this point. I'm able to like throw and hit, but I'm not definitely not catching. I'm still going through rehab, but I commit. Um, I'm all excited. Like okay, great. This is awesome. It's further south. The weather's better. Like I'm just cool. So and then I get accepted, and they say, "Here's your acceptance letter." And at the top, it says tuition, $62,000, expected pay for the athlete or for student, $58,000. I was like, "This is supposed to cost us like 26. They're going to give us a whole bunch of financial aid. Like, what happened?" So we're like, "Oh, it's an error." Um, and we start looking through all of it. Basically, what they did was my dad, uh, he's an entrepreneur. He started a business for it's called mergers and acquisitions, where he'll help one company acquire another or one company sell itself to another. Like that's what he had done for a while. So to start this business, he needed some money, so he took out a large loan. When he took out this loan, it was for the business. Like he spent that on operating costs and whatnot. The government decided to view that as, hey, you have X amount of money in the bank, and you might as well have just bought a large boat with it. Like it's free cash. You can afford this school. We're not giving you any money. So suddenly, like, so they pulled the switch on us. No, Johns Hopkins did it. The government, the
Yeah.
FAFSA, whatever did. So it was like, and I'm like, that's a lot of money. And I was starting to get healthy, and then became this whole decision of because now I had a valid reason to leave. Normally, once you apply an early decision, you can't, but I could now because I didn't meet their end of the bargain on with the finances. So it was like, I want to spend that much money on a school or not? And that was the best academic option by a landslide for me to go to. But it was also now $60,000 a year in 2012, so pre-inflation and whatnot. It was going to be hard as heck to be the student athlete there, and I was starting to get healthy, and I was kind of like, well, if I play at that level, like that's going to be the end of the career. So I was wrestling with it. I didn't have other options, but Buffalo, George Washington, and UMass were all interested. I think I could have went to either of those schools in hindsight. Like I would have been able to if I chose. I didn't have any real offers from them, so I was like, if I so I want to say yes to the safe, expensive, and less. It just felt like less of what I really wanted to do, even though I felt like the right decision I was supposed to make. Or do I want to go to one of these other schools? When I had visited, even though I was probably going to Hopkins, I still visited Buffalo and some of these other places to see. And at Buffalo in particular, their strength and conditioning coach was just on another level. The guys were just physical specimen. I mean, they were super guys squatting 600 pounds, um, really fast. You had these All Americans. This catcher Tom Murphy that was there before me was drafted in the third round. He's still in the big leagues now. Um, I had this other player, Jason Kanzer, who won a Gold Glove. That's the best defensive center fielder in all of college baseball. And to give it to someone at a small school like Buffalo, like really tells you how good
Yeah.
this player was. So I'm watching these guys. They have a FBS football team. Like they had just played Georgia or something. Um, I was watching that on TV, and I'm like, you say, oh, I go to Buffalo, like people know what that is. So it was like, this is a whole different. There's like 30,000 people that go to school. The locker rooms in the football stadium, they have this little big weight room. They're like, guys are strong. I was like, this is like, I was excited about it.
Yeah.
It's Buffalo's a good school. It's not an elite school. Uh, the average GPA to get in there was like a 90. So I got some academic money to go there. Um, they had a good engineering program. It was one of the like a top 50 engineering program. So I ended up deciding to go there, but I had to leave the safety net of Hopkins in order to pursue what was really more in line with who I wanted to be.
Hmm.
Whereas the that's really what it was. What the Buffalo players were turning into after their experience there was much more exciting for me to become than what the Hopkins people were.
What was your what was your experience like with the coaching staff there as a high school guy? Like did the coaching staff there make you more comfortable with your decision? Or was it more so just like the culture of the program, the culture of the school, and seeing the end product of those athletes?
The head coach was very good at recruiting. He did a good job. He's from Buffalo, knew everyone. He had played there back when it was a Division 3 school, and I mean, he sold it well. I wanted to go there. I wasn't a hard one to sell. They didn't have any money left over for me. They weren't planning to recruit a catcher that year, but another catcher that they recruited the year before me that they gave a lot of money to ended up not panning out, and they were aware of that. So they're like, okay, we need to find someone because they're going to lose this catcher, the big leaguer, future big leaguer. They're like, we're going to lose him in the draft. So
We
um,
need Kyle.
yeah, they need someone. I was in state, good student, came recommended from uh, some of the travel ball people, so uh, it wasn't hard to sell me, but I was just excited by all that. They had a catch. Their hitting coach was also a former catcher that worked with the catchers, so I was excited about that.
Hmm. Rare, by the
Um,
way. I can't stress that enough.
oh my
It's
God,
not always a guarantee that you're going to get a catching coach at the
I
college level.
it's not always a guarantee. It's I would plan on not having one,
Correct.
which is just ridiculous, but I understand why, just given who you can get on staff and the types of backgrounds you're gonna have to pull from. But man, like that's the reason I didn't want to go to UMass. The coach at the time, who's no longer there, the coach at UMass wasn't someone I really got along with well. So that wouldn't have been a good situation. And
Hmm.
then George Washington was a better program than Buffalo was from a where they played and their success and whatnot. They had some good players come out of there, but their facilities weren't as good and they didn't have a catching coach. So it was like I would be with if not when I showed up within a couple of years, like the I would be the most knowledgeable catching
Yeah.
guy at the school the second I showed up, which ended up being the case at Buffalo too. But that wasn't what I was excited about. So um,
Plus, who doesn't
yeah,
want to go to school in Buffalo, New York?
who does want to go to school in Buffalo New York? Um, yeah, that was a good experience. But
That's cool, man. So listen, at this point, you're gonna be a Division 1 baseball player. How do you feel?
uh, was elated. It was. It felt like, and this is the feeling I later felt after a few decisions in life, but it had felt like I was aligned with the things I was interested in and who I was going to become after the experience, that was that part I liked. It was I need to train really hard. I need to be around players that are better than me. I'm going to play at a high level. I might not have a chance to play if I don't really get better, but I have the environment in place in order to do the work. So it was exciting. It felt good to say I was playing Division 1, and it wasn't because it was like an ego thing.
Hmm.
Um,
But it is an
you know,
accomplishment and something that is worth celebrating.
yeah, no, it was, and so for that I was excited about, and it gave me it just felt easier to put my time into the things that I was gonna need to put my time into at that school. So
Hmm.
Yeah, it was yeah, and I was getting healthy at the time, so I was starting to like I played my senior season and I was healthy for it and played that summer heading to college and was just getting ready to be a like a Division One student athlete. It was exciting.
Yeah, we talk about we have talked about anyways in the past that that I guess like capstone experience of certain levels. As a high school baseball player playing in your last season, did you have any moments of, I guess, like, hey, this is my last time in a Ward Melville uniform, or this is my last time playing with people from my hometown? Like, any experiences like that?
No, I'm not. We
I
kind of
know.
talked about it in the first episode. I'm not really good at that sort of thing
It's okay.
because I was my career wasn't ending. A
Yeah.
lot of all my friends on the team, their careers weren't ending either.
Mm-hmm.
They were gonna go play in college as well. Uh,
How'd you guys do that year?
my senior year, not great. We were like 500. I don't think we made the playoffs. It wasn't. We weren't. We had a good senior class, and then not a lot of. Yeah, actually, to be honest, our senior class wasn't that good. We had myself was a good catcher, but I wasn't exactly helping us score runs. And then we had Anthony Kay, who again is a future big leaguer, or
Yeah, I
at
know.
the time was a future big leaguer, was on the team, so that helped a ton.
Yeah,
Um,
trust me, I know. He beat me the next year.
yep.
So, yeah,
So we had some of those guys, but beyond that, we were pretty thin.
he beat us. I
Yep.
won't forget that.
But I do actually have a story that's good for recruit. It's a good recruiting story for players or parents to hear. Before I committed to Buffalo or any of that, my playing my senior year, we're playing in these like non-league before the like scrimmages, and the George Washington coach is telling me he's going to come. He's like, "I'm up there this week. I'm going to be there." He tells me he's coming. He doesn't tell me what day, but he's like, "I'm." He's texting me like, "I'm in New York," so I'm thinking, okay, he's coming to the game today. And I basically had that experience for probably 4 or 5 games in a row where I was
Mm-hmm.
like, "He's here, he's coming," and then he didn't. He eventually did, but I was playing well those games. And I didn't see him in warm-ups, but I'm like, oh, maybe he'll just get here for the start of it. And, I got to tune that out anyways. So, and I also don't know what the guy looks like. I haven't met him in person yet. So I'm, okay, like, is he going to come or what? I'm playing well. I'm hitting doubles. Like, I'm blocking the ball well. I'm throwing well, uh, receiving well. I'm having good at bats. And I have this for like 3, 4 games in a row, which, and he wasn't showing up. And I remember I hit a double and I must have been hitting 450. I did not hit well my senior year, but I was hitting 450 during that initial stretch. And I'm hit a double and I'm on second base and I know that the guy's not there. And I'm like, man, I can't keep having these good games.
Yeah.
What the
Wasting
heck
all
is
your
this?
good at bats.
Right, like this. What
Idiot.
if this guy doesn't come, like I don't know how long this is gonna last for, which is probably an issue in and of itself. But anyway, so
But
uh,
relatable, dude. Relatable
yeah,
as hell.
so he eventually shows up to this another game, and I might have hit like a off the end ground ball to short, and I struck out twice.
Mm.
I bounced my throws to second during warm-ups. I probably blocked okay. I didn't receive particularly well. Like it wasn't. I didn't play bad, but it was not a good showing. It was a below average showing, and that was the game he went to. And I wasn't like, ah, oh, it's ruined. I didn't show up. Like I wasn't like, oh, that wasn't great. Now, my college career wasn't riding on this experience or not, but it's like, man. And he called me later on, and he's like, hey, how you doing? He's like, oh, I like the way you looked. He's like, dude, like I know you went 1 for 4 or whatever it was. Uh, he's like, I know you bounced at those. He's like, I've seen you throw it at one of our camps before. Actually, I had met the guy before. He's like, I've seen you throw at one of our camps before. Like, I know your arm's good. Um, like, I wanted to see how you were around your teammates, how the speed of the game was for you. I wanted to see you in person, how you're moving with the knee. And he's like, I talked to your coach after, and he was just telling me about like the kind of person you are. And he's like, I don't have it just yet. I don't know if it's going to be baseball money or academic money, but we're going to give you X amount, I don't know, 15 grand or something, which was a probably 25-30% chunk off of that school. And um, so he's like, good. And I was like, oh, cool. And most of that message went over my head, but like now when kids go into showcases or coaches come in to watch them and whatnot, and now that we're coaches and we've talked with scouts, like they're not looking to see like, oh, if this kid can't hit doubles, if this kid can't hit homers against high school pitching, then he's not going to play for us.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's just not the dialogue that goes on in their minds when they're talking. They want to see like what you look like physically, what your posture is like, what your body language is like, where your focus is during the game, how you are with your teammates when you strike out 3 times when they're watching. How do you act? Does the world end, or do you like? Obviously, you're going to be upset, but like, do you head back in the dugout, throw your gear on, and sprint back out and focus on that? Are you playing hard? Like that's what they're going to look at. If they wouldn't, if they knew that, if they weren't sure if you could throw the ball, if they weren't sure if you could run, or if you could block a baseball, then they probably wouldn't have showed up in the first place.
Yeah.
So it's just a
Yeah, listen, dude, that's the bottom line, and it's so much more, especially nowadays, than just this. Like, yeah, are there going to be times where, like, we're going to probably talk about Diamond Nation quite a bit, honestly, because it's a place that we've both experienced as players. Not to traumatize you, Kyle, I know you had a tough experience there, but as a coach, I've been there a bunch. Um, are there going to be times where you're down at a tournament like Diamond Nation and some guy just happens to walk up to a field and watch you hit a double and then follow you a little bit more? Yeah, but more times than not, it's not just that one experience. It's the fact that you've been in contact with this school, that you've sent video to this school, that that coach has watched you throw, catch, hit, field, whatever. And this coach has kind of vetted you a little bit by contacting some of your coaches. Like to Kyle's point, it's not. He knew that Kyle was a quality player, somebody who could, like, skill wise, play at the level that they needed to. And also, you got to remember too, um, a coaching staff also has to have confidence in their ability to develop talent. So if they have confidence in their ability to develop talent, they can take people and get them in better shape if they need to, or maybe make adjustments to a swing or whatever. And obviously, depending on the level, some levels it's just like, dude, performer, get the hell out of here. But like, there's just a lot more that goes into it instead of having the right day at the right time. And I know that a lot of people can just, I have a gripe with people who glaze over or just kind of roll past the idea of playing the game the right way, treating your teammates the right way. And as a coach who's had travel teams of college recruitment age, so many of the conversations were, what are his grades like? What's he like around his teammates? What's he like in practice? What's he like on a bad day? Not, how many bags does this guy have this summer? Is he stealing a lot? Does he make a lot of errors? It's like, if he strikes out, what's he like? Does he hustle out to the field? Does he take his at bats into the field? Those kinds of things. Like those, that's what the college coaches need to know. Because, and I've made this kind of an analogy or comparison to players before. When you're recruiting a kid to play for a college baseball program, it's like recruiting somebody to do a job. You're going to be working with this person for the next 4, maybe 5 years. In today's college baseball world, maybe like 6 or 7. But you're going to be working with this kid for the next 4 or 5 years. You know, so what's that person like? Do you want to go to work with that person every day?
yeah, no, the makeup of them and how they're going to fit into the culture, and is this the you're recruiting them as an incoming freshman, so you have to, are they going to fit in? But eventually, that kid's going to be have a lot of influence over the rest of your group, because that kid will eventually turn into a junior or senior. um, an upperclassman with some track record. And if he doesn't turn into someone that's going to be spreading a good message, or isn't on board with what you're doing, or isn't going to set a good example for the underclassmen, then you have an issue.
Absolutely. I think that was probably like it's interesting to hear your perspective from that time as a kid. It's like, all right, nice, I can go play college baseball here, good. But like as a person who's been through this now, it's like, wow, that conversation is it says a lot more than you might have heard as a 17-year or 16-year-old kid.
No, absolutely. So yeah, my experience at Buffalo was awesome. I mean, I made friends that I still see every year, at least once a year now. We keep in touch with. There's a group of 7 or 8 of us that them and their girlfriends and wives and whatnot will all get together and have a reunion, which is excellent. I developed a ton physically. I got to experience a lot of different. Um, I got to experience a lot of different players, both obviously my teammates, but then guys playing in summer ball and some different things. So it was a overall it was just a lot of development. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's really the transition after college and into coaching, which I think is uh, more the kind of conversation that's around when the time where I met you and our conversation really starts to flourish.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What I'm curious about though is, um, and what I would like our viewers to sort of get a little bit of insight on was at this time, college baseball player, are you starting to assume more of a leadership role? What does that look like for you? What did that look like for you? Was it a conscious thing? Was it something that sort of happened naturally? Maybe a combination? And because, obviously, end result is you become coach. But and I know that there was, and I'm sure you'll share this a little bit right now, but I know that there were other careers in mind, other like not being a coach. So when you were taking on these leadership roles, what was the overall goal, or was it just, hey, I see there an opportunity to be a leader, and I think it's going to help the team be successful.
So I obviously as an incoming freshman, I mean I'm still 17 years old, and going to college from a social perspective was just getting hit in the face. It was like shy, uh, fairly awkward kid in high school is now thrust into like Division 1 baseball and college with, when you're 17 heading into college, a 21, 22-year old seems like a grown ass man.
Yeah,
Because, I mean, in some ways they look like it. They got facial hair and they're bigger and whatnot. They're starting to talk about jobs and it seems like they're adults. They are, but in the grand
kind of.
scheme of the world, they're still in that transition. So, but from the lens of a 17-year-old, it's like these are men. Um, and so I was in no position to be a leader, and I didn't expect to be then. I didn't have aspirations of like I wanted to get some playing time as a freshman, and all that, but I just wanted to get better. One of the things that I started to do, early leadership trend, was when we would do our stretch to warm up. Um, at the end of it, our coach would have us do these speed ladders every day for 5 years. We would do these speed ladders per practice. I think speed ladders are so stupid. Um, if Quote from Buddy Morris, who's a strength coach at Buffalo, not our strength coach, but famous one. He had been a strength coach in the NFL. He said, if speed ladders made you faster, then piano players would throw 98. And a point is like putting the end of your like your fingertips or your feet in a predetermined pattern quickly into a constraint does not produce speed that comes from the center of your body. But getting off on a
That's
tangent,
neither
we
here
would
nor there.
Yep. Anyway, so um, we would do those every day. And I found myself going to the front of the line to go first, not because I wanted to, I guess I wanted to lead the way, but I wasn't trying to establish myself as, hey, I'm the leader or look at me. It was more like, this is something that needs to be done right. And a lot of my teammates, if coach says do X drill, they wouldn't remember it, or they would do it wrong, or they just wouldn't have the net set up, or they wouldn't be ready to go on time, or they might not give full effort. And I was like, those things are important to me. So if it's not getting done, then like I need to be the one to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I think uh, the core of my leadership style, or at least my strengths in a nutshell, was like, okay, so I'm going to go first. Um, some guys would chirp me here or there for going first, or just because it just became a habit where like I would go first. And again, I was very low on the totem. If there were 30 players on the team, I was player number 27, like 28. I wasn't a guy by any stretch, but that eventually morphed into being one of the leaders in the weight room, just making sure things are getting done appropriately, or just being at the front of the line at stretch, and just by example, with those sorts of things. There was so by the time I was a junior, I just based on who was the roster, who was on the team, I was one of we didn't have captains or anything. Um, I was one of the leaders in the sense that I was making sure everything was like I was the most prepared from a physical standpoint, doing all the work to prep, making sure we had the equipment. I was a catcher. I worked hard, had pretty good body language. Like my work ethic and effort were like the main things. Um, so I was a leader in that sense, not from a community clubhouse culture standpoint. We ended up having a teammate of mine, uh, name's Ben Hafner, is my best friend from the team from back then. He was our shortstop. He was the year behind me. So by the time he was like a junior, senior, did a much better job of uh, just chirping and poking fun at everyone and getting the whole locker room to be together. Um, so I think he ended up being more of the leader from a like community sense. I mean, we were good friends, so we paired off of each other. So it ended up like there was a phase where I was one of the leaders, and then towards the back end of my career, if you were to ask me then, and then if you ask me now, I'd say it was him, because he was more of a holistic, interpersonal leader than more of a setting the environment, which was more my skill set.
Yeah. But again, you're starting to take these steps. And again, you won't call some of these things leadership, although I would consider them leadership like steps. But at the time, my point is, at the time, it's not like, hey, I'm trying to be some leader. I'm not trying, like, you're not trying to build a foundation for a coaching career right now. You know what I
No,
mean? Just real quick, I gotta plug in my laptop if you wanted to take a second in
okay,
bathroom or whatever.
yeah, we'll take
I
a
just gotta
break.
plug in my laptop. Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay. So we've covered your youth baseball, high school baseball, and college baseball experiences. We're gonna kind of wrap up that college baseball experience. I do want to say we've had very different like paths and very different experiences in regards to those things, which
I can't wait to hear. I can't wait to go through yours, because
I
you've
know.
told me bits. We've filled in each other's past in a non chronological manner.
Yeah,
Um, but your compared to mine, your experience is wild.
it is. It's weird. It's weird. It's interesting. I think there are a lot of similarities to the way that travel baseball is nowadays too. And I think my thought process is, I mean, surprise, a little bit different than Kyle's. So it's going to be fun to talk about, and I'm excited to share it. But again, a fantastic story thus far. and some overcoming some adversity for sure. And I love to tap into the mindset too, because I definitely find it to be one, relatable, and two, some insight into like, dude, you became a Division 1 baseball player. You had a good career there too. There, and I want to kind of point out there are points where it looked like it just wouldn't happen. Number one, there were points where you weren't even freaking thinking about it. Where, like I kind of touched on earlier, there's some kids thinking about Division 1 baseball at the age of like 12 years old. So what I want to say to that is like get out of the hype and be where you're at, because I know the exposure is different, like we talked about. I know that those conversations happen a little bit earlier, but just be where your freaking feet are at, man. Be where you are in that moment. Again, I'm not saying that Kyle did that consciously, because as he alluded to or said clearly earlier, it wasn't something at the forefront of his mind. Like, I got to be where I'm at so I can get to my dream. Like, it was just him just playing the game that he loved, and even at times it wasn't like I'm playing this game because it's the game I love. You're just playing baseball, and then that love kind of grew, and so you're starting to get a little bit of leadership exposure as a again, not intentionally, as a college baseball player. Then you start to get to the more senior upperclassmen years of your college career, and what's the track like for you? I know we talked about like the hamate injury did happen in college, right?
Yeah, so I first weekend series my junior year, which I'm not going to tell you I was going to get drafted, but I was on the way to. Um, there was hype. I had to hit, which who knows if I would have. Uh, probably probably not enough to get drafted, but that the hype was there. Then I break my hamate, which ended up being a huge blessing because, like, yeah, it derailed that season, sure, but the team that year wasn't very good, so to miss that season was not the worst thing in comparison to the other years. With that, so something we need to get into. I started as a mechanical engineering student. I had done it my freshman year. I did okay. I had like a 3.2 GPA or something. Your freshman year in mechanical engineering is the classes are pretty generic. Um, you're taking like chemistry or intro classes, and it's not that difficult. Um, so I did okay. And then and you're taking a lot of gen eds. So when like a intro to art class is a lot easier than taking thermodynamics. Sorry if I said that out loud, but it's the case. So at least to get a passing grade, not to be exceptional at it, but I digress. So did okay freshman year. Sophomore fall comes around in my third semester, and now it starts to get much harder. And the way engineering courses are structured, and part of what engineering is you're faced with a problem that you have to figure out. It's not, and a lot of times the problem is unique, and you don't necessarily have the skill set or the answer just sitting there. It's not like a recall. It's not like, hey, you study this thing and then you memorize it on the test and now you know the thing. It's, hey, you have this problem. You kind of been shown an example of it, but there's some different things and you're gonna have to learn some stuff in order to solve it. And it's not like, oh, I have this homework, it's gonna take me a half hour and I can budget my time. It might take you 3 hours and you might not know what to do and you're asking your buddies and they don't know. What you need to do is go to a TA or with an upperclassman like a mentor and kind of seek help and work through it, which usually that happens in the afternoon after classes in study hall or at the TA's office. And I was practicing, so that was tough. So, and basically, I was sleeping like 4 or 5 hours a night, um, which I am not one of those people that can do that.
No, he's not.
Uh,
I can attest, he's not.
so I wasn't sleeping enough. I was like, exhausted all the time. It was just like on E the whole time. Going to baseball was my escape. I was working hard at that. I was trying to put everything I felt I needed to in the baseball, but then also succeed in engineering, and it was just neither was working. Um, so the difficulty of it was immense, but also I had gotten into gotten into engineering because I liked cars and like designing things and engines and that sort of like that was what I was interested in. But the actual engineering itself, I wasn't in love with it. I was with kids that did, and they succeeded because they enjoyed and they were curious and all these things, and I wasn't the case. The kid that was changing his parents' oil and rotating tires and looking up different things and watching videos on that when I got to college, that just kind of died because I didn't have time to. And what I was more interested, and I was fortunate to have some older teammates that were on this path, was between the strength conditioning stuff that I was learning as a player, being around some very good strength coaches, just loving that environment. And then I had some teammates that were studying exercise science that wanted to become physical therapists, and learning about from them telling me some of the things that they were learning. Like they were studying how your body responds to different types of training. They were learning how like nutrition works and some different things. And it was like, whoa, like, or they were learning how once you have a certain type of injury, like how the different types of tissue heal. And I was like, this is really cool. So between those things, I wrestled with it for a while. I decided to switch out of engineering to become to for a major to be exercise science, and then thinking I would eventually become a physical therapist. Because I did that, I was a semester behind, which, okay, not a big deal, but the program at Buffalo had you take gross anatomy as an exercise science undergrad, which normally that class is a graduate level class where you dissect human cadavers and, you know, from head to toe, learn every muscle and nerve in the body more for the most part. You do that during the summer for like an 8-week course. And because I was a semester behind, I wasn't ready to take that summer course with the other sophomores. I would have had to do it the year after. So it was going to take me another calendar year to graduate. So it's just kind of like, all right, I'll fill it with other internship opportunities, or I'll take extra classes, or I'll do something. Well, I ended up uh, breaking my hamate, having surgery. I was able to redshirt that year. Kind of had the course that I probably could have came back and played, but it would have been for like a month at the end of a broken season, and but at the cost of me getting a whole nother year back. And I was going to be there for another year for school, so it ended up working out. So I ended up getting 5 years of baseball. I needed 5 years to graduate because of the way the tracking worked. And my best friends on the team were all the year under me. Like I was sophomore, they were freshmen, but I was the same age as them because again I'm young uh, for my like grad year. So I basically aligned with my major, baseball, and my friends all aligned at the same time. So it was an awesome thing. So um, yeah, I switched to exercise science, wanted to become a physical therapist. I go through the courses. I'm doing well. Uh, Spent the whole summer dissecting people, which was crazy. Really cool though. Me and my best friend went through that, and that was awesome because I got to spend the whole summer with him,
That
studying
was up
together.
at Buffalo.
Yes. Yep. So I stayed up there for the summer. I stayed in one of our houses over the
Did you
summer.
play up
So
there too?
no, so I was still coming off the injury, but then there wasn't like a good college baseball team around there, and it would have been so tough. It was Monday through Friday. You're in the lab from 9 a.m. or when we had an afternoon lecture, so it started at like 11:30 and went until like 3, but like you're studying all day. So we had enough time to lift, to play catch and hit. We'd get lunch, we'd go to lab, and then we'd study all night and then do the same thing. Like that's all we had time for. So there was no way. I could have went and played in like a men's league or something. I just didn't,
Yeah,
which I think was a smart thing.
yeah,
So
probably better for your time.
yeah, I wouldn't have had time to. Um, so yeah, did all that, and then so that ended up giving me an advantage in what I do currently, having gone through all that. But so wanted to become a physical therapist. in 2016, so going into after my fourth year, going into my fifth and final year, I played summer ball in the NECBL, which at the time was the second best college baseball league. I don't know if that's the case anymore. The Northwoods was equivalent, but anyways, I actually played against Jeremy Pena. I have a picture of the two of us next to each other, which is crazy. So I'm 21. Yeah, I'm 21, going into my fifth year, and he's a freshman, his first college summer baseball league, and I hit a double, or I got on second base somehow. And there's a picture. He actually sent it to me. There's a picture of him. He's like, "Oh, I have this picture of me when we played you guys because we figured out we were." This is back when he was in the minor leagues. We figured out that we crossed paths in that league. He's like, "Oh, I have this picture." He shows me the picture, him playing shortstop, absolute stud, obviously, and there's me as the base runner in front of him, which is wild.
That's funny.
Um, I,
That's
I
cool.
wish I could tell you I knew he was special at the time. I I didn't know who he was. I'm sure when I watched him, I remember being like, "Oh, that kid's good," but I didn't know enough about infield, but just baseball and projections in general, and like how he moved and whatnot to realize like this kid's gonna be a future Gold Glover, World Series MVP.
Yeah.
Nuts, but um,
He
so
did turn out to be that like later in his college career though. Like he was definitely a show out type of player,
mhm,
which we have some annotation from one of our friends who we'll probably have on one day.
yes. So in that league, the host family I stayed with, uh, beautiful family. They had mother worked in like administration of like the local school, and then the father was a physician assistant, worked in the emergency room in a hospital, and they had these two little kids, and they're just beautiful house and up in the mountains, and it was the way they ran their family was wonderful. The host dad, like I said, was a physician assistant,
Hmm.
and through getting to know each other, he had asked like, "Oh, you're studying exercise science. You want to be a physical therapist?" And he's like, "Why don't you want to be a PA, a physician assistant?" And I'm like, well, "I never considered it." Um, he's like, "Yeah, well, the career is better. You could do a whole lot of different things, and it's versatile and whatnot." And I'm kind of like, I don't want to work in a doctor's office. That was my impression of it. But I did some due diligence and looking at it, I'm like, I think this is a better career path for me. My experience with physical therapy to that date was, they call them mills. It's basically what you, as an athlete, you don't want to go to, which is you show up, you and three other people are meeting with the physical therapist basically at the same time, or you like have a overlap. There's 30 people in the room and three therapists, and half the people are just buying time on a stim machine or doing ice, and they're telling you to do 3 sets of 10 of this and 3 sets of 10 of this, and that's like their entire program. And then they say, "Okay, your range of motion is good, it's strong, have at it." And then you go, and you're not even close to being built up to be ready to play yet. Uh, I wasn't aware of why that's not a good thing at the time, but I was very aware when I shadowed some of them, was like, I'm gonna have to be like social butterfly and make small talk and cater to all these people all day at scale. Like this is gonna burn me out really fast. So I was kind of like, I don't know. Again, it was putting me out of my comfort zone, so that was, there was me avoiding it for that. But then also, I wasn't aware of what a physical therapist could be. Some of these, my that friend I told you, my best friend that was doing the gross anatomy class with me, and then the other older teammate that got me interested in exercise science, they're physical therapists now. We may eventually have them on, and they work with an athlete specific population, and they practice it the way they see fit. But so, anyways, I look and I'm like, I could be a physician assistant, uh, make quite a bit more money, and I can work in orthopedic surgery, which and assist in surgery. Like that'd be crazy. Uh, it'd be so cool to be. It's sort of in between a nurse and a doctor, probably closer to the nurse than to the doctor, but it's similar to like a nurse practitioner where you can see your own patients, um, under the supervision of a doctor, and you work with them and whatever. So okay, I think this is what I want to do. I decide I want to do that, which means that once I finish my college career, after being there for 5 years, there's still some undergrad classes I need to take, like organic chemistry and biochemistry and some of these other ones. Medical terminology. In order to be a physician assistant, I also needed around 2,000 hours of patient care experience, which usually people that want to go down that track, they volunteer and do a lot of stuff in high school and through college, and they kind of have it by the time they're applying. I didn't do any of that because it wasn't the plan. So I needed to take these classes. I needed to treat patients somehow. So I became an EMT, an emergency medical technician in an ambulance. And I worked and volunteered as one of those for about 2 years, the better part of 2 years, um, which definitely didn't see myself doing it all. Uh, in high school, I thought, I don't like biology and memorizing things like that, and then whatever. And here I am. You call 911 and I might show up, which uh,
Not the worst thing in the world.
no, um, yeah, I was okay as an EMT. It's one of those things you need a lot of experience. Like you don't know, they teach you what needs to happen. So like, okay, person presents to you with these symptoms. What do you do? It's like it's pretty. This happens, do this. This happens, do this. You're not really thinking for yourself much. There's like a very set regulation for what you can and can't do in a certain situation. You memorize those, you practice it a few times, and you're really just there to get them to the hospital or to keep them stable as best you can until a paramedic who's way more qualified can show up and do some higher level stuff. But it gave me some good experience on, okay, how do you show up to a complete stranger who's in dress and be like, hey there, which is not at all a skill set I had had even a little bit beforehand. So I did that for a few years, and I eventually uh, get accepted in the PA school, which is very, not to try to give myself a pat on the back here, but it's very difficult to do. I applied to probably 30 schools, went on interviews at like four or five. I only got into one. Uh, to be honest with you, I think the reason I even got into the one was because I had coached one of someone that worked in the administrative building. She wasn't even in charge of making decisions, but she just worked in the building as like a secretary type position. Her son, who I won't say the name, but you actually I think coached one day. Uh, I coached the son, and the mom thought highly of me, and word spread, and next thing you know, I got in. I didn't know any of this until after, but so I got in. During that time, because it wasn't like, okay, go to school, work, and then you're 2 years later you're in PA school. There was a lot of like gaps in between all that. So I started, and we talked about this on the previous episode a little bit. I had started, I was done playing. I wasn't drafted. I was a good enough player to catch the professional level without a doubt. I belonged from a hit tool standpoint that didn't deserve to be there. So I wasn't picked, which made sense. Career ends, so I start heading down this medical path I just described. I graduated with a degree in exercise science, so for me to take, it's called your CSCS, your Certified Strength Conditioning Specialist. It's an exam. It's kind of like a final exam for the major. You don't have to have that as your major to take it, but it's really difficult to learn all of it without it. And the passing rate's actually pretty low. It's only like 60% or something. Uh, so I studied, took this test. So now I'm a certified strength conditioning coach just to have it because I already done the whole undergrad for it. And as we talked about, I knew that I was done with baseball. Wasn't gonna play. I had no aspirations of coaching. Again, these things I thought were better things to do than being a coach. But I was like, I have all this knowledge and experience of particular catching, but also training for baseball and working with teammates and things like that. I was like, what was the point of accumulating all of these different experiences if I wasn't going to, like, why would it stop with me? Like, what was like, yeah, I have them and I would love to have a conversation about it, but okay, then what? So decided to create a Instagram page called Catching Machine. One of my nicknames in high school was Machine, so Catching Machine became the thing. No free ads. So I create this page, and my goal with the page wasn't to become Instagram famous or to. I wanted to eventually make some money with it, which I didn't directly, but my goal was like I'm going to produce content and put everything that I have out there so it's out there and like to give back. So I started doing this. I had my strength conditioning certification. I was interested in learning some of that stuff. Uh, Tom Downey, a Philly scout and former coach of ours that we work with, he there was a stage where he was a mentor of mine. Now I consider him a friend more than anything. But he invited me out to hang out with some of the other coaches one night after playing, and he sent me this text message. I still have it saved, where he's basically like, your passion for life and this game and all this, like, ultimately it's not going to be denied when you're ready to start coaching or being around the game again. Like, let me know. Like, you'll be wonderful at it. Um, so that was really cool. I came back to coach at the Catchometrics camps that on weekly on Saturdays during the off season, and start coaching at this. And it was crazy because I'm aware right now because I've said crazy a lot, but it was interesting because I remember if there were more than like two or three kids listening to me at once, like a little substation, like, okay, we're going to do this receiving drill. And there's four kids in front of me and they're 14. And they're probably looking at me like we talked about earlier, like, oh, this guy's got it figured out. He's, this former successful player, like, oh my God. And I'm just, awkward 14-year-old. I was so nervous to talk in front of them. It was difficult just
Very
from the,
relatable thing. Very
yeah.
relatable thing.
Um, and I it'd be like, how do I explain this and what do I want to say? And it's kind of like it's
What
easy
is
to
too
freeze.
much, you know?
Yeah, not even that. It's just you say one word and you're like, what do I sound like? And it's awkward. And then you get used to that. And then now another coach walks by to listen to see what you're saying to those kids. And now there's another set of eyes and you feel it again. It's like this whole public speaking thing. But um, through that, we were doing this one drill. And this was probably the moment where I decided, like, I'm actually I didn't decide, someone told me and made me aware of it. We were doing some drill where it was like they would have the receiver or there I'd call runner or not. So they'd catch the ball, and if I called runner, they'd have to get up and do their footwork. They weren't throwing it or anything, but um, common drill. I'm going through it, talking guys through like the progression of what do you focus on first, what's important. Once this happens, then move to the next thing. Like, you make a series of decisions during that play, and they have to happen in a certain order. We'd go through, and then I had a thought when I was doing it. I was like, what if I yell runner late to mimic like a delay steal? I uh, I flip them a ball, they catch it, and then I go runner, and the kid's kind of like, what do you mean? You just did it wrong. Like, you didn't give me enough time. And I'm like, well, what's that like? So I start going on this, like, not like a rant, but I guess it was a rant. Start talking to them about how, okay, that's a delay steal. This is what you do. And then explaining to them that even though you're caught off guard, you're not rushed. And so I started explaining the whole thing. And it just sort of flowed. I was like in the zone with it. And Tom pulls me aside after and he's like, hey, like, you're really good. Like, you're getting pretty good at this. He's like, you're going to be really good at this. I was kind of like, oh, like, there's this validation, like, okay. Um, and then from there, it got more confidence and assurance with coaching in different aspects, and started to take a little travel team here that I could do on certain days while going to class in the morning. Or, okay, I'd work on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday all day, but then that meant that the other days I could go to a practice and go to a game or something. So uh, I got into coaching and eventually decided, okay, this Instagram page, like, I could turn it into a business. I'm certified strength coach. I could do some of that stuff in the gym. I could train them. Basically, what I wanted to do is I wanted to train them holistically. I wanted to train them in the gym and have that relate to what they're working on with hitting, and have them do all that, make sure they were throwing, do their sprint work. I didn't know any of it at the time, but the mental side of it was also really interesting to learn more about and eventually help guys with. So that's kind of how it all started. And like I mentioned on the previous episode, I decided, okay, I'm not going to school. Actually, I don't know if I said this. I backed out of school. Yeah, I don't think I told this part. So I backed out of school like a month before it starts. I say, now, I had been full EMT. I'd taken extra classes, spent money on different things, gone on interviews. I get accepted. There's like a 2% acceptance rate to any of these schools. Um, I I'd done a lot. So during that time, the program I got into was a 3-year program instead of a 2-year program, and that meant that it was just going to cost more money to, it was in a it was located in a very expensive area, which meant I would have to pay a lot of rent to go there and just more debt and student loans and government living stipends and the whole thing. So I'm like, man, this is going to be tough. And so I went through the process of joining the Navy to become a naval officer. So that way they would pay for my school as my physician assistant school. They would pay for it under the understanding of a contractual agreement that I would, after I was done, I would practice in probably a naval hospital. But if I wanted, I might have been able to go on like a naval ship and do all that in order to pay for school. So I was like in it trying to figure out how to make this happen. And after all that, like a month before school starts, I remember I'm working as an EMT still. I'm in a hospital waiting for a patient to come out, and I'm building momentum with the baseball stuff and side business. And it was, I think a lot of people go through this phase in their early 20s where they get exposed to like the the self help craze. You listen to podcasts that tell you like, hey, if you have a passion about water jugs, then you need to have a page about water jugs, and you need to be selling ebooks and you know, feel your passion and work. You know, what are you doing after your 9 to 5? And that's just like the message. And a person in that point of their life is very vulnerable to that. So you start believing it. I start doing it with the Instagram stuff. I'm like, okay. And I'm sitting in a hospital like waiting room, not even a waiting room. It's like it's that vestibule in between where the ambulances come in and where the emergency room floor is and where all the nurses are. I'm sitting there waiting for a patient, and it was like, hey, it's gonna be another 20 minutes. And my partner was someone I didn't really. She was on the phone or doing something, so I put in a headphone. I'm listening to one of these podcasts, and it's just telling you about like what are you doing with your life and the whole thing. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, yeah, and looking around, and I've gotten in the physician assistant school, and I'm gonna make over 100 grand doing one of the, not the job I'm standing next to, but I'm gonna be doing something like this. And I'm like, this is draining. And I remember observing, talking about to the awareness part, I remember observing people around me that I worked with as EMTs that wanted to become a nurse, wanted to become a doctor and whatever. And they were in the same boat. They were doing this for experience. It was like a stepping stone for them. And they're like, I could see the passion, the curiosity they had for these things. Like, oh, did you see this new kind of treatment they're going to do? They're going to roll out this new technology, or you know how they're not telling you to elevate people's legs anymore if they're having uh, low blood pressure or this or that. Like, and I'm just like, okay, like, could I have been good at it? Yeah, but I wouldn't have been great at it. And I'm fortunate because I was aware of what it was like as a player to be in love with doing something, to pouring yourself into something, to be aligned with it. And I could see people I was working with have that. But I was getting distracted by like training videos and baseball stuff and other things. And when I was waiting for when I was waiting for a patient and I was driving the ambulance and we had a couple like to pick them up from a hospital and I had like a half hour or whatever, I would go on Instagram and I'd be following kids and I'd be creating a post or I'd be commenting on stuff. I wasn't looking at let me start learning things or that are going to help me when I have this 3 years of a crazy amount of medical information I have to absorb. And I was more concerned with how am I going to do this and be able to sleep enough and exercise. Like
Yeah.
that was my worry. So I'm sitting in this hospital and I remember feeling this immense. It was kind of it wasn't a panic attack and it wasn't anxiety, but it was that kind of a feeling where there's just like this pressure, and it was like I gotta get out of here. And I didn't actually leave, but it was more of a figurative, like I gotta get out of here. I wrestled with it for a week or two. I decided I don't want to go to school. I start the business, which is now Brennan Performance, but it's just an LLC that helps me train players in the gym, lessons, do clinics, online stuff, like the whole thing, right? So I start that back out of school, and now I'm like, okay, well, I'm 24. Yeah, I'm 24 years old, 23, 24 years old, still living at home. I don't have any money. I have like six different jobs, which are all each paying me like, I don't know, $30 an hour for chunks of time throughout the week. And trying to figure all this out, putting stuff online. I was saying I gotta post every single day, doing that, making these posts. It's costing me more money. My overhead is more than my income. So if it costs me $100 to rent a facility, I'm only making 60. So I'm paying to go to work and doing all this. And at that time, I start to become aware that like I'm anxious and I'm dealing with that. And so all that's going on. And I remember it was in like December, and it was probably like the worst of it from that whole experience of like it's an identity shift again. I'm coaching when I was coaching third for an 11U team on some 60-foot field at a park. Before that, I played Division One baseball. I know a lot about this. I was a really good player. I played at much higher levels than this, so I know what I'm doing. But I'm going to have a good career. So I've got prospects, and like that was my identity, that was my self perception, and then it turned into I'm just a baseball coach that doesn't really make any money, and I'm out here, and I have this thing on Instagram, and I don't even know if I am a good coach or not, and it was just like this whole whirlwind.
And this is after you made the decision to not go to school too, so you're
Yes,
kind of like maybe feeling some regret, or am I?
I
Maybe not
didn't.
regret, but just kind of like, where's this going? Type of feeling.
Yeah, I wasn't the best thing about me having to do so many hours as an EMT was I did it long enough to learn that I didn't want to do it. So once I decided I'm not going to PA school, not once have I been like, what if? Um, there are some. I went through a phase in my mid 20s where it was like, what if I had done this or that, not as a PA, but something else. But I think you have those things because I didn't experience them. But going to that school, I never once I was like, what if I didn't? It was more like you said, it was, shoot, where am I going? How am I going to make this work?
Yeah, you had to also understand at that point too, like with your experience, that you have the capacity for something more. Whether that's in regards to your own personal playing experience, your overall experience as an athlete, or now, um, like again, whether it's coaching an 11U team, running clinics, or individually training people, is that you have the capacity to do this at a good and effective level, even with the feedback from people like Tom and others.
Hmm.
You probably started to understand that like this can go somewhere, just maybe not sure where.
Yep. So yeah, and during that time, to backtrack a little bit, when I was thinking about going into the Navy, I was coaching because I had time to. I was coaching. I didn't have interviews to go on or nothing like that. I had like a spring and summer waiting for the fall to start for the school. So it worked, the timing worked out perfectly where uh, the high school I played for, their assistant coach was taking a year off to spend time with his kids, getting them ready for college and whatnot. So I was the assistant coach for that season. And it was a really, really good experience. We had a good team, some players that listened and worked really hard, and that was a success. And we actually you beat me, you guys beat us, and the we were in the same role for different teams, but you
Yeah,
guys beat us in the
Suffolk
semifinals,
County,
right?
Suffolk County championship game.
Oh, that's right. You're right. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. You guys were the better team, and but so yeah, I
I
had
know we
gone
have a
through that.
nice picture. I mean, it's not very high quality, but we have a picture. And Kyle and I weren't really like friends at the time. We were more of like had worked with each other at metrics and stuff, and had
Yeah,
some
yeah,
small experiences with each other up until this point. But there's a picture of us shaking hands after the game.
yeah. Yep. Neither of us. It wasn't like we knew the picture was being taken. It was cool. I gotta find that. I have it, but I gotta get it. So yeah. So we're now in late 20. This is late 2019. Um, and uh, I'm in the depths of an off season trying to make business stuff work, working at different um, facilities and just 6 hours with them, and then this on Saturdays, and then my own thing Tuesday, Thursdays, and I think a lot of guy coaches just starting out, or even coaches that stay in that realm. That's what their schedule looks like. So
Yeah, dude.
still,
You're
doing
talking
that,
about
yeah.
my life right now.
hmm and I'm like, okay, I need online stuff because I have at this point I have like 13,000 followers on Instagram, and the engagement was really high actually because I was active on it and I was commenting on different things and posting Q&A stuff, and people would ask questions. It was really successful in that sense. So I need to start making money off of this. So I'm going to do online training for catching and for in the gym. I'm like, okay, if I'm going to tell a kid to do these exercises and I haven't met the kid before, he needs videos to look at. So I need to record videos. So I'm doing all this. I'm recording this sprint video where I'm starting on my stomach, and it's like a push up to sprint, but I'm doing it sideways. So I'm facing, like, let's say you took a lead on off of first, you're facing the catcher, you go into a push up position facing the catcher, and then you get up and sprint to second base. Like that was the type of movement. And I didn't feel like I was doing it right. So I send the video to Jason Kanzler, who's that gold glove center fielder at Buffalo that I played with 1 year. And he had been playing professionally at this point, or he had played professionally. He's older than I am. Um, he was done, and he was now doing uh, his own like online coaching Instagram whole thing. So he was getting into that. He was, I think, 27, 28 at the time, and I was 24. So I'm asking him for his feedback. I mean, the guy ran like a 6'3", and
Fast.
crazy, crazy explosive.
Fast guy.
And I sent him video, and he goes back. We just kind of go back and forth. I'm like, so he had worked with he moved down to Houston because I believe his wife's family was down there. So he moved down there. He'd been there for a little bit. He gets a job with the Astros as a uh, high A hitting coach. So he does his first year with that, and then this is now. I'm texting him in the off season, and I'm like, "Hey, what do you think about this drill?" We get back and forth. I was like, "How's your first year with the Astros?" And he goes, "It's like, yeah, it was good. They promoted me to Double A. Do you want to work with us?" And I'm like, uh, "Yeah." So he's like, "Let me FaceTime you." So okay. Now this is someone I had idolized and looked up to as a player, and still do to this day. And we would we had common interests of like training hard and getting better in those sorts of things. And I think he appreciated that as a freshman I would work hard and be consistent. But that's the extent of what our relationship was. I was like, I'm grateful this guy's giving me the time of day. I'm asking him questions about sprint drill, let alone the guy's actually caring that he's like, do you want to work with us? So I'm like, okay. So he FaceTimes me. He's driving. He's explaining to me what the role was to be call it the player development coach, which is um, basically like the fourth coach. Coaches first base, works with base running and outfield. So he's like, "Do you want it?" He's explaining it to me, and I'm kind of like, "Why do I deserve to be working with professional players? Also, I'm not an outfielder, and I mean, I guess basically I could do." But he's like, "No, no, it's really like it's a very open-ended role. You can like the guy we had last year spent most of his time in the gym, and he ended up becoming a strength coach. We've had other guys become analysts. Like it's like a feeder position. It's like if you want to work in baseball, like this would be awesome." I was like, "Yeah, sure, of course." He's like, "Knowing you, we'd probably put you somewhere where you'd want to work with catchers. Like we'd pair you with a manager that didn't have catching ability, so you could do the catching stuff." I was like, "Okay." And so he FaceTimes me, and afterwards, I'm like, "Oh, where you going?" He's driving. He's like, "Oh, I just got Starbucks. Just got finished training Bregman." And I'm like, "Just got finished
Sick.
training Alex Bregman, who 2019. I don't think he won. If I have it right, 2019 biased. They gave the MVP. Did he give it to Trout? I don't remember. But he had an MVP year. I think he finished second in the voting. Like Gold Glove level third baseman, hit three something with 30 home runs, like ton of
Monster
walks,
year.
whatever. Yeah. So I mean the peak for him. And I'm like, "Oh, so you're just casually his coach now, his strength coach in the off season, even though you haven't worked. He's not like he's a big league coach or anything, at least not yet. He ended up being one. Um, so their field coordinator calls me like that evening. We have like a 45-minute conversation. He actually coached in the same conference as us for a year. I think he actually coached like against me, or I don't know, doesn't matter. Um, so that had a good conversation. He's like, "Yeah, we like it." And he goes, "Honestly, I love the fact that you have this social media page, not because we're hiring you because you have followers on social media, but I get to watch videos of you coaching and talking and what your personality's like, and that's part of the reason we're interested." Where just without knowing someone in the organization and without people seeing, who I am and what my mannerisms are and that sort of thing, how I think, then, your resume is as high school coach, has a strength conditioning background, used to work as an EMT. Like that's not those aren't grounds to didn't play professionally. Like those aren't grounds to be coaching pro players. Um, I ended up getting the job and starting, and it was like this whole suddenly all the things, the identity crisis and all the things I was super anxious about and unsure of and whatnot were suddenly, if I had gone and spent 3 hours in the gym, that was an hour and a half longer in the gym that I should have been doing something to build the business. Like that was the way I would think about it. But now as I'm trying to be physically fit or make sure I can throw a good BP or I'm working on hitting fungos, like that's helping me at my craft towards my career. Even though I was a coach a baseball coach the whole time, it gave me a more of a purpose and like a track, which was really important for me. Uh, so I did that for a few years. I was worked with catchers in high A. So at that level, at the time, guys are like on their second and a half year of pro ball, usually at that point, if they were college drafted players. The Latin players had been pros longer. Those guys, the Latin players at that level are like 20, 21. The American guys are like 22, 23. So they're essentially my age, a year or two less. There's not enough of a gap for there to be a maturity.
You're like 24, 25 at this
Yeah,
point.
I was hired at 25, and then COVID, so that didn't. I was there for spring training briefly. Then COVID hits. Um, Actually, yeah. So after COVID, a lot of organizations furloughed their employees, and the Astros were very good in that regard. They kept us on, but there were still rumors that hey, if 21 doesn't happen, then like we're gonna have to get rid of people if we don't have enough. We're not making money. The uh, the Astros having gone to the World Series in 19 the year before and had been a successful organization for the years before that definitely helped them financially kind of weather 2020. But if 2021 wasn't going to be happen because of the lockout and whatever, like there was um, you can't afford to pay people. So
Yeah.
I caught wind through one of the players I was staying in touch with over that I was assigned to stay in touch with over the summer. And he goes, yeah, like I heard about this. I'm going to the fall instructs, which because of COVID they made it like this 5 week thing, which is longer. So it's like a 5 week camp where they just trained. They couldn't, you're still wearing masks and the protocols that were all still very strict, but you weren't playing other teams, but you could at least show up and train and be outside and get at bats against other professional pitchers. And so I caught wind of it and I was like, oh shoot, I wasn't invited because they're trying to keep staff small and keep expenses down and the whole thing. And I texted the guy who hired me, our field coordinator, and I was like, I'll find a place to live. Like I don't need money to go to. They're paying me a salary, but like I don't need extra money to go there to work it. But like let me show up. Like if you guys if I can come up and work it, and then if it costs me money to do it, I'll do it. Like I want to get the experience,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that um, I still hadn't proven myself yet. I got my foot in the door, but because of COVID, they were starting to remove levels, and different staff in other organizations are getting furloughed and the whole thing. And I'm like, I don't want to lose this chance. I didn't really get to do it.
You want to do some stuff too, man. You're excited. You got this new
Yeah,
job.
hmm
Understandable, and
I know. I want to coach catching at the you know only a few levels removed from the highest level, right?
yeah.
So, uh, I'm super pumped about it. I was like, basically, like, I'll come down for free. Let me show up. And they said, actually, we can have you come up. We'll have you do most of the catching stuff because the catching coordinator had just been doing the alternate site over the summer, uh, which was quite a taxing thing. So I got in, did that, and then it ended up working out where anyone who was at the alternate site or at that fall camp was kept on through the off season, and the people who did not do either of those things were ended up not being renewed or were furloughed, which was it's like wow. Like if I did, obviously I wanted to, and I was super eager, but if I didn't do that, like I there's no reason I would have been on that list, and then I'd be looking for another job. Um, so went through that. So I did in 21. We had a season, so I went and experienced that. Um, and after the it's so interesting because during the year I was very focused on guys improving at the skills and all that, and through that I built trust and whatnot. But it was my first pro season, which is just so much. It doesn't let up. You're worn down mentally by the end of May, but like there's still some things to be excited about in June. You got the All-Star break and July 4th, whatever. But like by the time July hits, you're shot. And then by the time August hits, it's like I don't even know if I want to be here. I'm not sure if I even want to be coaching baseball or why am I doing this at the pro level. And every year, myself and I think most of us go through that. And then September is just like, but then you get close to the let at the end. So I go through that, which that was such an experience. Just knowing what the demands are, what it's like. Um, Working as a catcher for those 2 years after that year, so this is end of 2021. They say you did a really good job. We have some important catchers in Double A next year. We want you to go to Double A. And on the surface, I should have been, oh my God, I'm now 26. As a 27-year-old, they're going to put me as a coach in Double A. Like that's Double A's a legit baseball. Um, Double A is outside of getting to the big leagues. Double A is like getting the pro ball is a huge step up in talent. High A to Double A is huge, and obviously getting to the big leagues is his whole thing. But going to Double A is like where men get separated from the boys of a level, especially for us because it's in the Texas League. I don't know if they still call it that, but it's in Corpus Christi, Texas, which actually you're familiar with.
Very humid.
Yes,
Very humid
the
there.
weather is. I've been to Corpus Christi once, not with the Astros, but um, weather is difficult. But the shortest there's like 2 bus trips in that league for that location that are a couple hours, but every bus trip after that's like 8 to 12 hours.
But yeah, it's like all the way down there.
Yeah, and
It is.
you're playing someone in Oklahoma or in West Texas or yeah, it's the travel in that league is I say brutal, but I don't even think that's fair. So
We need a new word.
um, yeah, so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go do that. I'm gonna be a development coach again. The at the time that coach was a very like grunt work. It was front tossing for the hitting coach. It was standing at first in the heat and just kind of you're not coaching hitting, so you're just sort of waiting so then you could go watch the catchers and when you're and you've experienced this when you're coaching first base, when you're coaching a base, you're not with your team
Hmm.
during the game. When they're hitting, you're on the field. So when they're in the dugout, you're in the field, and then when they're in the field, you're in the dugout. So you're unless you're striking a conversation with the pitcher or someone who's not playing, you're just sitting by the coaches and you're not really engaging with them.
Yeah.
You're just sort of watching the game. And at the pro level, I'm not telling guys to make adjustments mid game. I'm not yelling out second base. Like that's just not how it is.
Stay
If
back.
if a catcher makes a bad throw, I don't he doesn't come in and you're not telling him, hey, you should have transferred like this and you should have been doing this. Like talk about it tomorrow or we won't because maybe he knows what he did and whatever. So it's you're just watching the game and you're writing down what happened so you can write your notes. And I'm like, I don't want to go to do this in double A with all the travel, grunt work. Like it wasn't a lot of high quality work. It's like I'm not learning anything. And they call it affiliate brain, where you're just so into it where you're not exploring new things. You're doing the same thing every day. It's hard to have time to like learn stuff or do creative things. So I'm like, I don't know. And I built some really good relationships with some of the pitchers, believe it or not, and then the catchers that I had. They were American or they spoke English, and I developed good relationships, and it was really rewarding to just be around them. And when they got called up, it was one of our players got called up at to Double A at the end of the year, and the manager let me tell him. So I opened up this. Uh, I made this PowerPoint telling him about his receiving metrics and how there's this new technology and how we're gonna do this thing. I made it up, and I'm going to the end of it. I'm like, yeah, we're gonna have to work on this. And then I click to the last slide and it says you're going to double A. So he just like found out in the moment. And I had one of our other coaches record his reaction. Like it was so cool. And there was another, and the last like week of the season, I realized like, why am I spending so much time writing on, did he catch this one pitch well? Like that's not that important of a thing, especially when I could go looking at a video. Why don't I have a conversation with one of the pitchers that I got to know about like his plan for the off season, or one of the hitters that's not playing that day and like talk to him about what his plans are for the off season, his training and what he wants to get better at. And I had those conversations and they were so fulfilling and that like they mattered and I felt like I was creating a relationship and this all happened at the very end. And afterwards, as exciting as those were or as good as those felt, the other half of the dugout that was from Latin America, I was not having that relationship with. I was like, I can't, like, I can coach them. I knew enough Spanish. I'd been learning a little bit. Like, I knew enough to get the point across. Like, hey, put your arm up here instead of here. And they say, okay, thanks. And they try it. It helps great. And like, they knew I cared, and they knew I was a good person, but I didn't know them. Like, they weren't telling me, like, hey, my girlfriend was or my wife back home with my 2-year-old son back in Venezuela is they're fighting with their mom and it's been weighing on me. Like I'm not having that conversation with them at all. So afterwards, I was like, I need to coach the other half of our guys. Uh, at the start of that season, I was afraid, I was intimidated to go near them because they look different than me. They have a different background. My perception of them as a white person from a good area that didn't have a lot of minorities was that they're intimidating and maybe a little bit like hard for me to relate to. I later learned that they're some of the nicest, most open, um, caring, warm, and friendly people ever.
And also, like,
And
they're away from their home too. You might be able to relate to them in more ways than you probably thought at first, because you're focusing on the differences rather than the similarities.
Of course, yeah. So um, we are so yeah, so that offseason I'm like going to double A do the same thing again. Like I don't think like yes, it's a higher level, but it's not the quality of work isn't high enough and I'm not getting better at like every time I've made a decision with career or school or something, it's been what am I gonna become once I do this? After this experience, after this challenges me in a certain way, then like what am I then? And what am I then is how I decide. It's so me going to double A wasn't the thing I wanted. So I remember to that same former Buffalo player that gave me a really strong recommendation and got my foot in the door. He became the hitting coordinator, and we were driving, and he was like, "Would you ever want to be a hitting coach?" I said to him, "I don't want to be in a cage all day," and um, I didn't think that just wasn't something I considered again. And fast forward to December of that year, he goes, "I need a sec. We have two hitting coach positions. We're gonna have two teams in the DR. We have one of them hired. We need a second one. The first person I thought of was you." I'm like, "Yeah, like let's do it." I don't have any hitting coach experience, certainly not at the pro level. And I've been working on Spanish pretty diligently. I was like, that'll be good. I had gone to the Dominican Republic once before. I volunteered to go there. Again, I'm getting paid a salary, but I volunteered to do extra to go there to experience it. I had a really good experience when I was down there. So okay, I'm gonna go. I was like, yeah, I'll go. My Spanish will be so much better afterwards. I'll now have experience on the hitting side. I can help them with some of the other skill sets that I have, like my understanding of the body and training and just uh, logistical stuff, like just being an American. They're different cultures, and hopefully I can learn from them. I can learn from the Latin players uh, what they're like at that age, better understand where they're coming from. I can relate to them better. I can learn how to coach them because coaching the Latin players is a little bit different. Just the way where they're starting from and the way that they respond and what they're used to. So all these sorts of things. And so I went and did that. And after that experience, then now heading into 20, that was 2022, 23 and 24, I was a hitting coach in the US at our complex in Florida, but what I was doing was really with the rehab space. So any position player that got hurt, it ended up being once I, it became the understanding that I would be in the role that once they got hurt, they would come down, work with the physical therapist. Like if someone had a like a rotator cuff strain and they needed to whatever, or they had surgery, work with our physical therapist down there. We have good facilities for it. We have a specific strength coach that works with those guys. And then when it's time for them to do their baseball stuff, whether it's, hey, you're going to be playing a game soon, you got to go to practice, or more like, can this player with a shoulder injury, can they still do some single arm hitting? Can they do some, depending on the arm, can they throw or catch? Can they still do defense? Like things like that. And now my background in understanding anatomy, friends with physical therapists, my experience in the medical field, uh, I had experience coaching catchers, outfielders, the strength stuff, if I hadn't mentioned that yet. I now had some hitting coach experience, not enough where I consider myself very good at it, but at least I was aware of what the things were and I had a good relationship with the guys in charge of the hitting department. And uh, suddenly all this random different set of this path just gave me the skill set to holistically handle those guys for the last few years. And so yeah, it was pretty cool. Just a whole unplanned roundabout way to just create better relationships with the guys.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's something that you and I have talked about quite extensively over the last couple of years, and I do believe that you end up where you need to be. So, although it was a uncomfortable at times and not exactly a linear path, it proved overall beneficial for the role that you ended up in. It's not easy to see when you're kind of going through the grinder, so to speak. But knowing you at least, I know that you, again, like you just kept believing that you were headed to where you needed to be, it sounds like, which is cool. Which is cool. It's just a freaking dope-ass journey that you took to get to where you are now.
Yeah, not planned. Very lucky in a lot of ways. But like you said, it's just continuing to try to get better at things and do things you're interested in and all that's been a good guiding feeling.
Yeah, well, what I'd like to kind of point out is your ability to continuously say, like, identify things that you need to get better at, to, and I know that some of it was not, again, it wasn't necessarily to benefit, like, there were key points throughout your story, like, when you're sitting in that area as an EMT, realizing that this is not what you're going to end up doing ultimately is because it wasn't your overall passion. But while you were there, you were acquiring important skills. Like you talk about your initial interactions with humans in moments of extreme duress. Like I'm not saying that in baseball that somebody struggling is life or death type stuff, but when you're a younger man, and especially dealing with some of the Latin players being so young, it can feel like that. So those are skills that you acquired along the way that are ultimately serving you well in your experience now. And also, dealing with guys that are coming off injury now, like I'm sure, first of all, you can relate in a sense that you have experienced some extreme injuries and some injuries that have altered your career path. Like you can feel like a little bit of a loss of identity. You talked about after your knee surgery, you kind of experiencing like 15 months of uncertainty until you felt like you could play like a normal baseball player again. So all things that, again, while in the moment didn't have your where you are right now in mind, is ultimately serving you because you were able to be proactive with wherever it was that you were.
Absolutely. I've talked for quite a bit there.
Mm. Sometimes you just gotta let them ride, man. It's
Mm.
it's a the from your college experience to your now professional career. I've heard a lot about that personally in our conversations. Some stuff that you've talked about in like the last hour, maybe not too cued in on 100%, but for most of the stuff that you've covered here is stuff that you and I have talked about, and frankly, this episode is very much about you and your journey. So when a man's cooking, sometimes you just got to step back and smile and let him cook and admire him for the great things that you've done. And it really is incredible. I know that you're not the type to typically step back or even in the moment kind of be like, wow, this is, because it's just, to you, it's just, this is what I have to do. This is what I have to do. This is good. This is interesting. That's something that I enjoy quite a bit about you, and I think makes you good at what you do. And you and I have had many conversations about improvement as a coach. When you described you going to metrics and talking to that small group of 14-year-olds for the first time, I was like, yep, that's Kyle right there, getting in front of a group of 14-year-olds and being like, what the hell do I even say right now? But a lot of what you discussed is not only important that I think for our viewers to kind of get to know you a little bit on, but I think it's also important to take some of the things that you spoke about throughout this episode and for people to consider in their own careers as athletes, for parents to understand about their player that, listen, maybe you don't end up where you think you should be or will be or want to be in the beginning, but when you're able to focus on your task, when you're able to, um, I guess, in the short term, like take care of the things you need to take care of to best serve you in that specific time. Ultimately, when you do end up where you need to be or where you belong, all of those skills you acquired on the way will serve you. I feel like in our world, a lot of it is you got to be a good hitter, you got to be a good defender, you got to be this. But if you really listen to the things that you shared with us throughout this podcast here, there's so much more to it. That your playing career will end. That is a fact, and a lot of us, I would say 99, probably maybe more than 99% of us do not choose when the end of that playing career is. So when you're able to approach things the way that you described, which is why I feel like you're a very good role model for players, and I feel like you're a very good role model for coaches, when you're able to approach things in the way that you did, when you ultimately do get to your position, and listen, this is not the end of your journey. You know what I mean? There's still so much more for you, and that's not even just in baseball and life. Like you have acquired so many skills that will aid you in those areas. So to bring it all back to Ted, like when the parent is out there watching that kid struggle, like be a voice that sounds like Kyle's dad. Be a voice that sounds like Kyle's internal thought processes when you can approach it in a constructive way, in a way that will serve you, in a way that will help you grow. When you ultimately do get to points like, for you becoming a professional coach, or for you to freaking up and move in your life to the Dominican Republic for another job within your organization, like you're going to do well in those things.
It's an odyssey, isn't it?
It really is, dude. But you know what? Like I'm somebody that believes that you end up where you need to be, like I said earlier. So, and the journey is far from over for you. It really is. And I'm sure, there may be even updates throughout this podcast in the future talking about different uh, trials and different opportunities. So,
One of the coaches I met in the Dominican Republic, Dominican guy, but had I think gone to college in the U.S. So he bilingual, and he's I think in his late 30s or early 40s at this point. And but like mentally, he's still really in tune with it, and he's very active and whatnot. And he's just talking about like the journey as a coach with the players and everything. And he said something that stuck with me after the end of a conversation of like, yeah, you're always trying to figure it out. And he's like, the story never ends. It doesn't, it just keeps going. It's
yeah,
not whether it starts and ends with a chapter or even you, like the story just goes.
yeah, yeah. And even if it is the end of your career in certain ways, like the people that you impact to continue on. So the ripple effect is real, So something that I admire you for doing a lot was identifying, especially when you first got into pro ball, that sort of disconnect with the Latin players, because I know that like a lot of our listeners might not know me, but and I know you do, but the player coach relationship is so important. So personally, that was my favorite part of that whole professional baseball experience for you, was when you identified that sort of schism and realized that you needed to do something to close that gap for those guys.
Yeah. That's been one of the more rewarding parts is being able to create bonds with guys that are from other countries and uh they're doing a lot, man. They they when they're 15 or 6, well shoot, when some of them when they're 10, 11, 12, they go in at least for part of the time of the week or even for weeks at a time. They'll go live in away from their families with these academies, and they'll train a bunch just at the hope of one day they'll be able to get signed and have a chance to play professionally and make some money. And and then they come over to the United States, and their perception is like they don't know the language, or if they do, they know a little bit, but they once you get out of like Miami or New York, those two airports they're pretty geared for Spanish, but then like once you get outside the airport, like the United States is not built for Spanish speakers um, outside of select neighborhoods. So they're doing that, and the tech the United States is just unrecognizable if you had only experienced the Dominican Republic or uh, I haven't been to Venezuela, but some of these other places where some of these other backgrounds and to come here and now they're trying to figure this out. There's pressure. They have to perform. They've got a whole laundry list of people that are relying on them financially or otherwise. And there's already this perception because there's a big gap in the standard education that the American player gets compared to the Latin player. And for them to come to the U.S., there's already this perception that um, they're not as smart just because of the lack of formal education, and then they also are struggling with English and the structure that's here and the way things are is just different. So, like even if they knew the language and they were educated, the way things operate are just different because they haven't been exposed to that yet. So, and they're away from their families, and their family ties are a lot stronger than ours are culturally. So, um, it's a lot. So to be able to appreciate those things and to be able to talk with them is it's important. I to be honest with you, I think it's more important than for the American player. The relationship with the American players for me are probably deeper because we have more similarities and the language flows easy. But I think the work that we do with them is um, there are less consequences for them.
Yeah,
So it's cool. It's a good purpose.
yeah. Just a chill guy that likes coaching baseball and stuff.
Yeah, man. Well, Dwayne, I appreciate you and good job with the whole facilitation. We're not calling it an interview because that's not what these are going to be.
Yeah.
But this is particularly challenging for you because you already know quite a bit about me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so to make this a conversation where it is a conversation and not tell us about this, tell us about that, and to bring in insight and to recognize key points that might be useful for the listener and to bring them up is it's not easy. I think that's why we decided to do me first, so I could see how you navigate it. Because you're next, brother.
I know. But listen, if there's something that you do well, it's ask questions. you know, I think that you are very good at identifying what needs to be focused on. I think you're somebody that can sort of bring to light important points or aspects from what somebody's talking about. And you've already given us a little bit of insight into your ability to recognize that, I guess, somebody like that somebody has something that is of value, you know, whether it is in your ability to communicate with players, in your ability to communicate with other coaches. And, it's not to be said, too, like, this guy that helped you with your opportunity to get a coaching job professionally, he's not doing that if you're, you know, if you're a bad team guy, I guess I can say in a nice way, or somebody who lacks personality or character traits. You wouldn't get the kinds of opportunities that you've gotten thus far. And again, does luck have something to do with it? Absolutely, but I do also believe you put yourself in a position to be lucky. I don't think you just get lucky. I think you put yourself in advantageous positions to be lucky. I think that's kind of more or less how it works. So kudos to you for being a good teammate.
Thank you, sir.
Of
I don't have
course.
a whole lot else to add.
Yeah. I mean, we're gonna this is the story of Kyle Brennan thus far. And now you're here podcasting. So and I think we did highlight this a lot in the last episode is much in line with what you said in regards to why it is that you started coaching feeling like you have knowledge to pass on, and sort of having a sense of responsibility to do those things. And it just, you live it. Me personally, I know this from being friends with you, coworkers, partners now. I feel like it is just, it's that sense of responsibility to yourself and to the players, the people around the game, other athletes and aspiring leaders, that is what's driving you to do this now here with me. So I'm excited to, again, I've said this a bunch of times. I've said this on here a couple times. I'm excited to see where it goes because the story continues.
Story never ends.
Yeah, the story never ends.
All right,
But well
sir.
done. Well done. We made it through the Kyle Brennan origin story.
Yeah.
Um, I hope you guys enjoyed that insight into the career path of Kyle Brennan from little leaguer to professional baseball coach, which again I cannot. You might not do this for yourself, but big pat on the back for you for getting to this point, man. People like myself and I'm sure family members and friends are super proud of you. And somebody like myself who does work in baseball can say something like, there is not a better person for this type of work. And I'm glad to see that there are people like you out there doing this type of work, because I know that our game at a very high level is being cared for in a very good way.
Well, I appreciate that. I've learned from some very good examples and from having conversations with some really good people like the ones we are having. So um, I'm just try to reproduce what I see as valuable. So
Absolutely.
thank you, Dwayne.
Yeah, time to get after it. It's time to get to
Yes.
practice now.
Yeah, you gotta get going.
Yeah,
All right. Well, look forward to hearing yours.
absolutely. Appreciate you guys hanging on. That was a beautiful experience.